Here we are, guys, in part 8 of this story. What if Naruto was smarter than he appeared to be in the manga? What if he resembled his father more than his mother, both physically and psychologically? Naruto is wise and powerful. Please remember to like, subscribe, and share with your friends. Now, let's begin. Naruto watched with narrowed eyes as chaos seemed to make its presence known across the whole stadium in just a moment. No doubt about it, the invasion has begun, and most probably, this is not the only place that is being attacked. Oto and Suna shinobi would most likely be attacking the most vulnerable areas as well, like the academy. His eyes narrowed at the last thought in silent anger. It was a perfect strategy to kickstart Konoha's destruction. If they attack the foundation of shinobi in the village, the field where the future generation of shinobi were born and bred, Konoha would be absolutely crippled. The amount of time it would take to recover from such an attack would be so long that it wasn't even funny. I really hope Ero Sennin is still in village. For now though, I have other things to concentrate on. He sensed foreign chakra in his system, a genjutsu settling on him, trying to put him to sleep. A quick pulse of his chakra shattered the genjutsu, and just in time too. His danger sense rang in alarm, alerting him of a threat behind his back. He didn't need to turn around to find out what it was, he already knew. Just as the arm of sand reached him, red lightning wildly danced around his body. Naruto ducked right under it, and spun on his heel, thrusting his right palm right into Gaara's chest. Only then he got a good look at what Gaara had transformed into. His right arm had transformed into a giant claw of sand, which had purple lines, looking suspiciously like seal markings. His gourd seemed to have melted into sand, having spread over his right arm and his back. A huge tail had formed on his back, which Naruto deduced had enough swing force behind it to smack someone right into unconsciousness. Naruto then saw where he had struck and smirked. Gaara's chest was uncovered by the sand, exposed for all to strike. He amped up the lightning, causing lightning to streak across Gaara's body. Gaara roared in pain, his muscles spasming and contracting against his will. On instinct, his tail swung around with devastating force to strike Naruto away. Naruto neatly backflipped away, and was up in his stance immediately, his Hiraishin Kuni held in both hands, reverse grip. The shock of Naruto's lightning was enough to throw Gaara back several feet, light burns appearing on the places that weren't shielded by his sand. Gaara sat up groaning, putting both of his hands on either side of his head. Naruto knew well enough what was going on, and this was his chance to stop it. Just as he was about to rush at Gaara, 4 figures dropped between the two of them, causing Naruto to narrow his eyes. The eyes narrowed further when 2 more figures jumped right in front of him. Sasuke saw the genjutsu and easily dispelled it, wondering what the hell was going on. He then set his eyes on the arena, seeing Naruto face off against all the 3 siblings. Sasuke frowned, looking around. The entire population of the audience seemed to have fallen asleep, most likely the result of a genjutsu. Looking back at the field, he made a split-second decision and jumped off, landing right in front of Naruto and dropping into his stance. I may not know what is going on, but I'll be damned if I let you fight all of them alone. You already have stolen one of my fights, I won't let you do it again. Genma was not entirely surprised when the invasion began. The senior shinobi had been briefed upon the invasion by the Sandame, so they already had their orders on what to do. Genma looked at Naruto, who was in a fighting stance against the Sand siblings and a Jonin, most likely their sensei. He chewed on the senbon he always kept in his mouth. Considering what I've seen up until now, Naruto could easily hold his own against those. But it's better not to take chances. He jumped in front of Naruto as well, noting with slight surprise that the Uchiha arrived as well. Good, I wouldn't mind some extra backup, especially an Uchiha. He took his stance as well, facing the 4 Sand shinobi. Baki sweated a bit as he looked at his opponents. A Jonin of Konoha, one who he could likely take on and win, but he wasn't sure if his students could win against the other 2. He wasn't that much worried about the Uchiha. While he had won his fight in the prelims, he had shown nothing special over there. If Temari and Kankuro were to team up, they could likely defeat him. But it was the blonde that he was most worried about. The cold, azure eyes that reminded him of a legendary shinobi of the past. Those eyes contained no mercy, only cold deadliness that could kill you in the blink of an eye. Uzumaki Naruto had just become a major obstacle in their plans. With the Hiraishin no Jutsu, Namikaze Minato had finished off 1,000 of Iwa's shinobi in mere seconds, single-handedly securing Konoha's victory at the Third Great Shinobi War. Baki had no doubt that his son could do the same. He had almost defeated Gaara, and would likely have if the signal for the invasion hadn't been given and he hadn't interfered. They would have to tread carefully. Looking back at Gaara, he noted the various burns on him that were healing slowly but surely. A bad sign, considering that the redhead was clutching his head, no doubt fighting an inner debate. Quote, Tamari, Kankuro, he spoke in a low voice. Once he had their attention, he said, Gaara's a vital part of the invasion. But right now, he can't fight. Take him to a secure place until he heals and recovers his chakra. Once he is fully recovered, resume your mission. Kankuro nodded and picked Gaara up. Understood. Tamari nervously glanced at the opposing side, specifically at Naruto. For the last 2 days, she had spent most of her time thinking on what she would do if she and Naruto faced each other in the invasion. After much thought and deliberation, she had come to the conclusion that she won't be able to bring herself to kill Naruto. Her feelings for the blonde were only growing. She pushed back her tears on seeing him now. His eyes were colder than what they had been 2 days ago. She could see no hesitation in them, only iron-hard resolve. Kankuro nudged her. Let's go, Tamari. Stealing her own resolve, she nodded and they both jumped over the stadium walls, heading into the forests of Konoha. Genma made a sound of irritation, and slightly turned his head to address the two genin. He didn't know why this decision made sense, but he had no choice. Kakashi had already issued his orders to him. The nerve of that Cyclops. Uchiha Sasuke, he spoke in a serious tone, drawing the attention of the said Uchiha. You have been said to be above your peers, so I'm going to assume that you are Chunin level already. He was interrupted by a smirking Sasuke. You want me to pursue them and defeat Gaara, right? Genma nodded. He hated sending genin, who he didn't even know the level of, after a murderous, homicidal psychopath who was also a Jinchuriki. But orders were orders, after all. Try to hold out as long as you can. I'll send backup as soon as I can. Sasuke snorted. Backup won't be necessary. I'll defeat them. He shot Naruto a challenging look before jumping after the three siblings over the wall. Naruto watched as his teammate disappeared over the wall. Arrogant, impulsive idiot. Not dropping his guard, he addressed the proctor. Genma-san, was it a good idea to send him alone to fight an unstable Jinchuriki? Particularly when he has no backup. Genma replied, sorry kid, but I had no other choice at the moment. Kakashi already gave me orders to send you to him once the invasion begins. Report to him for your assignment immediately. Naruto did not like the situation at all, but could do little about it. Nodding, he immediately located Kakashi's marker and flashed away, leaving Genma and Baki to face off. Genma began in his usual lazy drawl, you guys have a lot of nerve, attacking us like you did. Baki scoffed as he pulled out a kunai, less talk, more fighting, tree hugger, xxxxxxxx. Kakashi was keeping a close eye on his surroundings, and couldn't help but worry when Sasuke leapt off in pursuit of the siblings. Naruto would have been a way better choice, but he had not counted Sasuke's disqualification as a part of his plans. He could only hope Sasuke remained alive until backup arrived. Backup. Now that's an idea. He was posted for protection duty. He was to ensure that the civilians were safely transported to safety under the protection of the Anbu. He looked over to the arena, and saw Naruto nodding at something that Genma said and vanishing a moment later. That was perhaps the only reason he did not jump in surprise when Naruto suddenly appeared beside him. Naruto, you are working with me today, if only temporarily. The forces would soon be swarming in the stadium any moment. The Anbu are clearing the stadium of the civilians. We will be tackling the forces inside the stadium. Naruto nodded seriously. Was it really a good idea to send Sasuke after those three instead of me, sensei? Kakashi resisted the urge to sigh. He had already questioned himself that plenty of time already. Not really, but I'm hoping he would be able to hold out until I send you after him. Now pay attention. The first of the forces are coming. Indeed, the sand and the sound shinobi had started entering the stadium. Naruto narrowed his eyes and made a half-ram sign. Kakashi watched curiously as a shadow clone popped into existence, with the same seriousness on his face. He watched as Naruto pulled out a scroll from his right hip pouch and handed it over to the clone. You know what to do. The clone nodded and vanished a moment later. Kakashi turned serious. What was that you gave to your clone, Naruto? And where is he going? Naruto gave him a smirk. Don't worry, sensei. Just a little help for our dear Hokage. Kakashi narrowed his eye, but let it go. He trusted Naruto not to do anything stupid in this situation. Alright, I'll trust you on this one. But first, you engage them with Guy. I'll join you in a moment and tell you when you have to go. Naruto nodded and almost flinched when Guy appeared by his side. Yosh. Let's go, Naruto. We'll show them the consequences of their unyouthfulness. Naruto just muttered, hi, whatever you say. The two of them vanished, appearing on the battlefield. Kakashi looked around. The Anbu were engaging the shinobi on the stands, providing cover for panicking civilians to escape and head to the shelters. He easily dealt with the two shinobi that were headed his way, slitting their throats within a minute. He looked over the stands, trying to find where his pink-haired student had crawled off to. He spotted her in the very back, and smiled. She had dragged the entirety of Team 10 with her in the back, in the hopes that they won't be discovered. He had to give it her. The girl had grown some balls to be able to get her comrades into a safe zone in the middle of the enemy. He stealthily made his way to her. Sakura. He was immensely proud when she immediately turned to face him, a kunai in hand. She immediately lowered the kunai. Kakashi-sensei. Don't scare me like that. Kakashi's eyes smiled, but then turned serious when Sakura asked him. Sensei. Do you know where Sasuke-kun and Naruto are? Kakashi contemplated on what to tell her. I know where Naruto is right now, but you don't worry about him right now. As for Sasuke, I've got a mission for you. Sakura blinked. A mission. XXXXXXX. Hiruzen took note of the feathers falling as he turned his head towards the cage. The other man took the same action, and as their eyes met, a smoke bomb exploded on the balcony, hiding them from view. The Hokage's attendant yelled for him to run, but it was too late as a kunai buried itself in his chest. The cage leapt to the roof with the Hokage under his arm and a kunai to the old man's throat. A team of Anbu darted after them but had to turn as the Kazekage's attendants appeared behind them. With a quick slice the two men became four, but the pieces of the bodies didn't drop as they tossed off their cloaks, revealing 4 teens. The 4 now exposed Oto Nin quickly flashed through seals before pushing their palms out and naming their collaboration jutsu. Shishienjin. A purple wall came into existence in front of them, taking the shape of a cubic barrier. An Anbu was about to test the barrier when the voice of the Anbu captain rang out. Don't touch the shield, or you will burn, he said to the Anbu standing by his side. But Taicho, what about Hokage-sama? The captain grit his teeth and looked at the 4 Oto Nin holding up the barrier. He was not a fool. Whatever was going to happen inside the barrier, it would likely be something big and dangerous enough to kill the Hokage. If he attacked the Oto shinobi, there was a chance that the danger inside the barrier would be unleashed onto the village. He could not take that chance. Not to mention, the 4 nin had secondary barriers around themselves, the function of which they were unaware of. He had no idea how to release either of the barriers. Their odds were very, very bad. Guess we'll have to have some faith in our Hokage. XXXXXXX. The clone watched from his hidden perch with calculative daze as a purple barrier went up on the roof of the building of the cage box. So they decided to use that barrier. Not bad, he mused as the barrier went up as tall as almost 400 feet. Good thing the old man already has a mark on him. Otherwise, doing this would have been almost impossible, he remarked to himself as he flashed away. XXXXXXX. Hiruzen glared at the smirking form of his former student. He had entirely expected this to happen, so he had worn his battle robes under his Hokage robes. Orochimaru. He whispered, ready for any trick his student might pull. Orochimaru noticed this and chuckled. It seems you expected all of this, sensei. It didn't miss my attention that the Konoha shinobi were rather, unusually tense. Orochimaru looked at the old, but determined form of his sensei and almost chuckled. Did he really think he would win against him today? He was already pushing himself at the age of 70, which was no age to be exerting yourself as a shinobi. Not to mention, he had a guaranteed success, with his newest ace in the hole. Orochimaru smirked deviously. Do you think you can defeat me at your age, sensei? Hiruzen ignored the taunt and said, this time you went really far, Orochimaru. It was my greatest mistake to let you escape that day, but no more. Today, You will die, even if I have to take you with me. Orochimaru asked curiously, where's all this courage coming from, sensei? Hiruzen was stoic and instantly replied, this is my will of fire. As long as it burns strong within me, I can guarantee your defeat. You can never defeat someone whose will of fire burns strong. Orochimaru chuckled, which turned into a full laugh. What courage you display in the face of your death, sensei. But today, I'll show you just how weak your will of fire is, that is, when I extinguish it and raise this village to ashes. Hiruzen glared at him, and was about to attack when something flashed blue in his peripheral vision. He almost fell due to surprise. Naruto. What are you doing here? His heartbeat increased rapidly as he saw the blonde standing right beside him inside the barrier, facing Orochimaru. Before he could enter the state of outright panic, Naruto raised a hand. Don't worry, Hokage-sama. I'm just a clone. Orochimaru narrowed his eyes curiously as he set his eyes upon the blonde mystery that was Uzumaki Naruto. When he had first encountered the genin in the Forbidden Forest, he had been slightly impressed that the boy had been able to kill his summons with complete ease. Not only that, but he had formed an impressive tag team with the youngest Uchiha and managed to put him on the ropes. Now 1 month later, he had been surprised by the blonde, yet again, when he managed to learn and apparently master the incredibly difficult and complex Hiraishin no Jutsu, the jutsu that earned the Yondaime his name of Yellow Flash. He then proceeded to best a Hyuga in taijutsu, and utterly humiliate him. Not only that, but he managed to completely turn the tables on a Jinchuriki, without using his own Biju chakra. Here was a dangerous combination of genius, power and skill, that too at such a young age. Even Itachi hadn't shown such abilities at this age, and that guy was right up there with Orochimaru and the Yondaime in terms of being a genius. Right now, he curiously watched the interaction between his former sensei and the genin. Perhaps he was here to offer some help to the old fool. Hiruzen almost sagged in relief that the Naruto beside him was just a clone. No matter how powerful and talented Naruto was for his age, he was not ready to deal with the likes of Orochimaru just yet. So why are you here? The clone then pulled out a scroll and held it out to the old leader. Prime sent me to give you this. Hiruzen accepted the scroll with a raised eyebrow. Most probably, Prime was the original Naruto. What is it? The clone smiled, some reinforcements, just in case. Use it only when things really get out of hand. Remember, he gave a look so serious that Hiruzen thought he might as well be looking at one of his senior Jonin. Prime is counting on you to use it, Hokage-sama. Don't disappoint him. The clone then vanished in a poof of smoke, leaving an amused Hokage, despite the situation he was in. Tucking the scroll securely on his waist, he turned to his equally amused student. He settled into the Sarutobi clan's taijutsu stance. Shall we begin then, my wayward student? XXXXXXX. Back down in the arena, it was a bloodbath. Suna and Oto Shinobi were on the ground, either dead or knocked out. But mostly dead. Guy and Naruto had almost been like a force of hurricane. Guy had tore through the forces with his powerful taijutsu, breaking bones and ending lives with only 1 or 2 hits. Naruto on the other hand, decided not to use the Hiraishin, instead choosing to rely on his flash step. With his tri-pronged kunai coated in wind chakra, combined with his speed, almost nobody escaped his slash. He also made full use of his ability of a slower perception. He was flash stepping across the whole arena so fast that even a blur was difficult to spot. In a single flash step, Naruto would sometimes slash 2 enemies simultaneously, ending their lives in an instant. In a few seconds, it would be all over and a new group of shinobi would enter the arena, only to suffer the same fate as their dead comrades. This is getting kind of boring. Naruto muttered as he ended the life of another Oto shinobi. This was the 3rd batch he and Guy had taken care of, and Naruto was not impressed, at all. No shinobi was able to counter his speed. Before they could even begin thinking of a counter, Naruto would catch them off guard in their blind spot and slash. Dead. Everyone moved almost painfully slow for him to kill. I wonder if this is how Dad felt, being the fastest man alive. Naruto. Naruto turned around to catch the challenging grin of Guy-sensei. How many? Naruto internally sighed at how hyper the man was. He really did not see how one could be so hyped after killing so many shinobi. Still, he would humor the guy. 68, he replied after going over it in his mind for a second. The reaction from Guy caused him to flinch in alarm. Guy cried tears as he held up a fist. Oh. It seems I have been bested in count. Naruto looked at Guy as if he had started speaking Latin. Since when had this become a freaking competition? He slowly started freaking out as Guy began to make absurd promises of how he would do 5,000 push-ups if he lost again. If he couldn't do that, he would run 500 laps around the village on his hands. If he couldn't do that. Alright, that's enough, Guy. Kakashi's voice came as he jumped his way towards them. Kakashi landed right next to Naruto, who was blinking as if coming out of a trance. Kakashi gazed at Naruto with slight concern. Working with Guy for the first time can be a bit overwhelming. He knew that from first-hand experience. Leaning down a bit, he whispered in Naruto's ear, "You okay?" That seemed to do the trick, as Naruto shook his head to clear it, probably from the excess youthfulness. "Thanks," he murmured, but quickly added, "but don't think we are good. I'm still upset with you." Kakashi nodded to himself. He would have to correct his mistake with Naruto once this was all over. "We'll talk later then." Naruto nodded, putting his kunai back in his pouch. "So what am I doing now?" Kakashi first asked him, "Can you really handle the Aikibi as you are now? How much chakra have you left?" Naruto chuckled and patted his stomach with a fist. "Don't underestimate me, Kakashi-sensei. I've yet to fully spend even a quarter of my total reserves. I will manage. Now where am I going?" Kakashi smirked under his mask. He really does have ridiculous reserves of chakra, he mentally whistled. Outwardly, he spoke, "You are a censor, right? Sasuke went in pursuit of the Sand siblings, so as a backup, I sent Sakura and Shikamaru to track him down with the aid of my summon, Pakun. Shikamaru probably had pursuers, so you'll meet him on your way to Sasuke. Meet up with him, track them down, and stop the Aikibi from rampaging the village." Naruto nodded, "Roger that." He placed 2 fingers on the ground and in just 2 seconds, he had the location of Shikamaru locked on his sensory radar. "Got you," he whispered. He stood up and leapt up to jump over the stadium wall. Kakashi sighed and turned to Guy, who looked like he was about to burst with joy upon seeing Naruto go. Before he could open his mouth, Kakashi pointed behind him towards the oncoming shinobi. He rushed past him and killed the first sound ninja. "Concentrate, Guy, otherwise you'll lose to me as well." Probably one of his many bad ideas, but really, who was counting? His instinct alerted him to something approaching at high speed, but not at him. It was approaching at the squad of enemy forces. He watched, fascinated, as a highly compressed ball of impacted right between the shinobi forces. It exploded with the compressed wind with great force, easily taking out 7 of the enemy shinobi. Kakashi looked up with his Sharingan to see Naruto standing on the wall, a smirk on his face. With a 2-fingered salute, he was gone in a flash step. "Yosh, let's go with our youth at full power." Yup, one of his bad ideas. XXXXXXX. Shikamaru gulped down the water Asuma had offered him with greed. Dealing with the pursuers had been way too troublesome. Catching all 8 of them with his shadow, then finding out that one ninja was still not within his grasp had almost led to his death. He had tried to find out the hiding spot of the 9th ninja before his chakra ran out, freeing the shinobi from his grasp. Alas, he was too late and almost killed, had it not been for Asuma-sensei's timely arrival. Asuma had taken the 9th ninja out, preventing him from assisting his comrades. Then, he proceeded to help out Shikamaru by taking out the other 8 ninjas in just a few seconds. Shikamaru just muttered, "Troublesome," and just sat down to take a rest. Asuma smiled at his student as he sat on a log. "For your first time in deep enemy territory, that was not so bad, Shika." Shikamaru scowled at his sensei, "It would have been better if you had just done it without hiding like that. Exerting so much had been such a drag." Asuma snorted, but accepted it in stride. He had learnt long ago that Shikamaru was smart, but lacked the motivation to actually use those smarts in battle. Both the student and the teacher were lost in their own thoughts until they heard the telltale sound of a kunai whizzing through the air. Asuma prepared to tackle whatever enemy was coming, but was confused when the kunai landed on the ground in front of them rather than being thrown at them. Asuma immediately understood, while Shikamaru relaxed. A tri-pronged kunai. As soon as the kunai was lodged on the ground right before them, Naruto appeared in a blue flash, his grasp already on the thrown kunai. Asuma couldn't help but be amazed every time he watched that jutsu in action. To able to travel from one point to another in an instant, So fast that your enemy doesn't even have time to react would be devastatingly useful. Naruto pulled the kunai out of the ground and stood up. Once again, Asuma was astounded on seeing the similarities between Naruto and Namikaze Minato. The almost identical shade of hair, similar hairstyle, same shade of the eyes, the similar shaping of the face and the same, deadly expression on the face. Shikamaru straightened up out of instinct, even if there was no enemy around. Naruto exuded a dangerous aura right now, an aura that made it clear just who was in command. Even in the presence of a Jonin like Asuma, who had the most authority over Shikamaru, that aura was blazing like a star. Naruto turned to Shikamaru, a serious expression on his face. "Shikamaru, you and Sakura were pursuing Sasuke, right?" Shikamaru raised his hand and pointed behind him without a word, too bothered to even speak right now. Naruto nodded and made to move when Asuma's voice stopped him. "What's the situation back in the stadium, Naruto?" Naruto rose an eyebrow but replied, "The Anbu have almost fully evacuated the civilians from the stadium and most likely, are in the process of escorting civilians all over the village to the shelters. Suna and Odo forces are swarming the stadium in groups. Me and Gai-sensei were taking out the forces until Kakashi-sensei switched with me and told me to pursue Sasuke. He said he had sent a team of Sakura and Shikamaru as backup in case things get bad for that impulsive idiot." Asuma thought over it a bit and asked, "Is there anything else?" Naruto frowned and then lightened up. "Oh. And your old man is fighting Orochimaru inside a barrier." His reply had the predicted result as both Shikamaru's and Asuma's eyes widened in shock. Orochimaru. Wow, didn't know Shikamaru was capable of stuttering like Hinata. Naruto turned to him. "I didn't hesitate, did I?" He watched as Asuma's expression changed to reflect his thinking on this piece of news. Just when Naruto was about to say something to ease the man a bit, all of them felt it, even if Shikamaru didn't know what it was. The unmistakable feeling of demonic chakra, washing over them like a wave of malice. Naruto mentally cursed, "Shit. Things are getting serious on that end. I better get going." Turning to Asuma, who was looking in the same direction with narrowed eyes, he quickly said, "Asuma-sensei. I better get going. I cannot afford to waste any more time here." Asuma's head snapped to Naruto, and it was a bit amusing to see the student and his sensei with identical expressions of disbelief. "Why, you surely don't mean you want to go over tea there, do you?" Naruto narrowed his eyes, causing Asuma to tense up a bit. He did not have time for this. "I have a way to stop whatever is going on over there. We can't afford to make things worse than they already are. I know what is going on, and I'm sure you do as well, Asuma-sensei. If you have a better option than Fuinjutsu, I would be happy to hear it." Asuma only looked at him with dead seriousness. "If you're sure about this." As expected, Asuma did not have a reply for Naruto, nor did Shikamaru. Naruto nodded and turned to Shikamaru. "Hold out your arm." Shikamaru blinked. "What for?" Naruto sighed in annoyance. "I don't have time for this at all." He forcefully grabbed Shikamaru's wrist and released it after a moment. Shikamaru looked down and curiously enough, there was something imprinted on his wrist. A seal formula, to be precise. He raised an eyebrow at Naruto. "I'm guessing this is your Hiraishin marking." Naruto nodded and started walking away from them. "If I find any one of ours in the way, I'll directly send them to you. It's best if you wait for 5 minutes before returning to the stadium, though." Shikamaru could hold it no more. "Wait, Naruto. You might be good, even Jonin level maybe, but this is too much." Naruto was touched how much the shadow user cared about him, but now was not the time. He waved a hand in his direction, not stopping from walking away. "I'll be fine, Shika. If you want, have Asuma-sensei tell you why only I can do this. I give my permission for you to tell him." "Asuma-sensei. Either that, or you can wait for me to tell you. Just remember though, it's a secret. It stays a secret until I say so, got it?" With a flash step, he was gone. Jumping through the trees at a breakneck pace, he was just a blur to anyone saw him. He stopped though, when he saw an unconscious Shino on the ground. He jumped down, keeping an eye out for any enemies that might be waiting in an ambush. When he sensed none, he ran to the insect user to check his vitals. Kakashi didn't mention he had sent Shino as well. He's mostly fine, even if his breathing is rather quick. Also, the body does not twitch like that when unconscious, he deduced. Looking around, he glanced over at Shino's opponent, a knocked-out Kankuro. He glanced back to Shino. More specifically, the back of his elbow which has a senbon sticking out of it. He deftly plucked out the senbon and threw it away. Knowing how Suna favored its puppets, there was a possibility that the senbon might have poison coated on it when it stuck Shino. Better send him to Shikamaru, he thought. He was about to send him through the Hiraishin when another thought struck him. Asuma and Shikamaru don't know that Shino was poisoned. What now? He stood up, carrying Shino in fireman style and vanished from the spot. Shikamaru and Asuma were about to head back to the stadium when Naruto arrived in a sudden blue flash. They automatically jumped back, tensed up for a fight, relaxing only when they saw who it was. Asuma gave a sigh of relief, but Shikamaru grumbled, "I won't ever get used to that." Naruto ignored that and handed Shino to Asuma, who asked, "What happened?" "I thought you were going after Gaara." Naruto informed him, "Had to personally get him to you. Pretty sure he has been poisoned by the puppeteer. You should get him to the hospital as quickly as you can." Asuma nodded, and as one, he and Shikamaru took to the trees, making haste on getting back. Naruto nodded as well and resumed on his way, making haste in response to the steadily growing aura of malice that the Biju chakra created. "You didn't mention the puppeteer to them," Kurama stated curiously, referring to the fact Naruto prevented the capture of an enemy. Naruto flippantly replied, "Gaara will thank me later for that." He knew he was getting closer. The burnt marks from Sasuke's fire style, the scratches on the trunks made by the claw that had formed on Gaara's body. However, it was a completely different story when he arrived at the scene. Crouching on a branch high above, he observed the scene carefully. Sasuke was barely standing on his legs, no doubt having exhausted himself by using jutsu after jutsu. He also had the curse mark spread all over him, showing that he had run out of juice a while ago, and now was relying on the power from the curse mark. And even that looked like it was running out. Sakura had been stuck onto a tree with sand, unconscious. But it seemed Gaara was not interested in her at all, so it was a bit better. A few branches away, Temari looked to be a bit better, if not in a similar condition such as Sasuke. She was breathing heavily, probably from having to fight off Sasuke to allow Gaara more time to recover. But she was injured as well, if her holding her left side tenderly was any indication. He turned his attention to Gaara and had to stop himself from gaping. Sand had fully covered his entire upper body, with only his feet remaining uncovered. His facial features had changed as well, becoming more animal-like, and his eyes resembled to that of his tailed beast, with the same seal marking on his body that Naruto had seen on the arm in the stadium. Now both his hands looked like giant claws, and his tail had also gotten somewhat bigger. Naruto narrowed his eyes. His transformation has progressed way more than I had anticipated. Taking him down in that form will be way more difficult than when he was only half covered with sand. But there has got to be something I can use. Some weakness has to be there in this form. He critically examined Gaara's transformation, looking for a weak spot. Okay, his entire upper body is covered in sand, both back and front, which means it is useless to attack those areas. They are likely reinforced with dense sand to be more durable. His hands are a no-go, he would smack me away with those. There is no point in attacking from a blind spot using Hiraishin since he is a tail to take care of that. His speed, strength and durability has likely increased beyond what they previously were as well. But his legs, they are uncovered. That is the only weak spot that I can see. Wait a second. His entire body above the origin point of his tail has been reinforced, but not below it. A smirk graced his features. He had found the place he needed to attack. The whole thought process didn't take more than 5 seconds. His danger sense rang out, bringing him out of his thoughts. His eyes went wide when he saw that Gaara was attacking not Sasuke, but his own sister. He then noticed that the positions of both of them seemed wrong from what he had seen 2 minutes ago. That son of a bitch. He used Kawarimi to avoid Gaara's attack. And knowing Gaara, he may not even care who he's attacking as long as he gets his blood. Oh, I'll have your hide for this, you asshole. Naruto was already moving from his spot, his danger sense slowing his perception to allow him to appropriately react. Gaara was laughing madly as he jumped from his branch, claw outstretched to tear Uchiha Sasuke apart. He did not even stop in confusion when the Uchiha was suddenly replaced by his sister. It only meant more blood for his mother. And plus, she was also among those who caused him pain. He would kill her and bath in her blood. Sasuke panted heavily as he knelt down on a knee. He had pulled the substitution off very close, and was running on fumes now. He felt a bit bad about using the girl as a replacement, but it eased him somewhat that Gaara was so clouded in his bloodlust that he failed to distinguish his enemy from his sister. One enemy less for him to deal with later, right? Temari had never been so much terrified in her life as she saw Gaara racing towards her. She had been pushed aside by Gaara earlier when he began his fight with the Uchiha. She had hit a tree trunk and had probably cracked some ribs. Deciding that it was better to rest rather than interfere in Gaara's fight, she sat down on a branch. She was resting when she felt a pull and suddenly, she was facing Gaara who looked like he wanted to tear her apart. It suddenly became clear to her. That bastard Uchiha had switched places with her. She was filled with grief that her life would end by her own little brother's hand, and in his blood-lusted state, he wouldn't even remember he killed his own sister. As she had read about how in your last moments, your entire life flashes in front of your eyes. That is exactly what happened to her right now. The last thought before Gaara almost got to her was of a certain, blue-eyed blonde. She closed her eyes tightly and waited for the pain to come. However, instead of pain, something suddenly grabbed her, causing her to open her eyes and involuntarily shriek in surprise. They moved, so fast that it was a blur, and the next thing she knew, she was a safe distance away from Gaara. I never had any siblings, but what I do know is you never, ever, attack your sister like that. The voice was almost shaking with rage. Her eyes shot open and she finally got a good look at her savior. Naruto had an expression of dead seriousness on his face as he looked at Gaara, with Temari in his hands. Never had he felt such cold fury before. First, the asshole he called a teammate had the nerve to substitute with Temari, and make her own brother kill her. Then, Gaara has the gall to almost kill his sister in cold blood. Rest assured, he would get his payback on Gaara right now. Sasuke would have to wait. Temari felt her face getting warmer as she found out that Naruto was carrying her bridal style. His right hand was behind her shoulders, clutching her so that her face was right next to his chest. His left hand was supporting her legs from behind her knees. She tried to move around a bit, tried to get him to drop her, but he took it as a sign of her being uncomfortable, and therefore readjusted her in his arms. Gaara grinned a maniac's grin. Uzumaki Naruto. She was one of those who caused me pain. Tell me, why shouldn't I kill her? Temari grimaced as Naruto tightened his hold on her at Gaara's response almost protectively, and dare she think it, possessively. Naruto turned to Sasuke, who was watching him with wide eyes of shock. Sasuke, I'll leave you to handle him for a few more moments. It's your fight, isn't it? Try not to lose until I return. In a flash step, he was gone. Sasuke gaped at the scene with total shock and disbelief. He just couldn't believe Naruto's speed. Gaara was an arm length away from tearing the girl to pieces when she had suddenly disappeared. Even Sasuke with his Sharingan had only caught a blonde blur. When the blur had settled down on a branch, he got his first good look at who it was. And he was blown away. Naruto had not only tracked him down, but had gotten here in just enough time to save the enemy from Gaara. Why would he want to save the enemy? It just didn't make sense for him. Then Naruto told him to hang in here until he gets the girl to a safe place. Just whose side is he on anyway? Can't he see how he was running empty here? He turned back to Gaara. No use complaining now. He would just have to wait until Naruto got here. He hated to admit it, but Gaara was on a totally different level than him. His fire style was useless, his taijutsu was null against the transformed Gaara, and the sand monster was unusually strong to have tanked his Chidori. The bastard had forced him to use it 3 times, while his limit was only 2. Speaking of Gaara, his chakra had become a crushing, malicious force. If Sasuke hadn't felt it before, he would have been frozen in fear. As it was, he had felt a similar chakra from Naruto back in Wave, when he had shielded Naruto from the Ice Senbon. Did that mean Naruto was somehow related to Gaara, since their chakra had some similarities? He shook his head. Now was not the time to delve into chakra theory. He was almost completely out of chakra, so he could no longer attack effectively. He would have to stall Gaara long enough for Naruto to return. Naruto had handled Gaara with relative ease, but he doubted Naruto could handle Gaara when he was like this. XXXXXXX. Naruto had tree-hopped until they were a good distance away from the fight. A hand came to rest on his chest. My side, Temari whispered with an expression of pain. Naruto blinked and then grimaced. Sorry, he whispered back, loosening his hold a bit. Once he was sure that they were almost a mile away from the fight, he jumped back to the ground and settled Temari at the base of a tree. Temari shifted until the weight was off her left side and relaxed a bit. Looking up at Naruto, she almost expected him to finish her off. But instead, she found him looking at her with concern. As if killing her was the last thought on his mind. Are you alright? Temari frowned suspiciously at him. You won't be killing me. To her surprise, Naruto snorted and knelt down beside her. What makes you think I want to kill you? Temari tilted her head with narrowed eyes, the fact that I'm your enemy. Seeing that Temari still refused to drop her guard around him, he sighed and said softly, Temari, I can never bring myself to kill you. Temari's eyes softened as she easily heard the genuine truth in that statement. Naruto wanted to grasp her hand to comfort her, to feel her comfort, but he was on a tight schedule. Temari, he called her. When he had her attention, he said, you know that I need to stop Gaara. He's your village's Jinchuriki, so you guys must know of a way to stop him from going on a rampage. I need to know what it is. Temari shook her head, you can't. It's a tailed beast, a demon of epic proportions, nothing can stop it. It's impossible. Naruto smirked softly and flicked her nose playfully. He grinned as a surprised blush came over her face as she rubbed it. I'll have you know that a word like that doesn't exist for me. That's a word for people who have run out of ideas. The temporary playful mood once again turned somber as Naruto whispered. No way, you say. He then stood up, looking in the direction of the fight. He sighed with resignation as his dead expression came over his face. Then I have no option left. Temari's head shot up at that statement, eyes wide with terror. Her hand shot out to grasp Naruto's, who turned to look at her with a quizzical expression. What? Temari felt tears pricking her eyes, and as much as she tried to stop them, they flowed out anyway. If you are going to stop him, don't kill him, please. He's my brother, she pleaded with tears flowing down her face. Even if Gaara was homicidal, he was her little brother. She couldn't bear the thought of him dying, at someone like Naruto's hand no less. Naruto's expression softened at her tears. There was no way he could leave her like this. He knelt down once again and with the thumb of his other hand, he softly wiped her tears away. Please don't cry, Haim. It's so difficult for me to see you like this. And whenever did I say that I was going to kill him? Temari did not protest at all as Naruto wiped her tears away. She could use a bit of some external comfort. She felt herself calm down a bit as Naruto rubbed her hand tenderly. Naruto wiped all her tears away and brought up their joint hands. I promise you, Temari. Gaara won't die today. Kissing her hand once, he got up and turned away. In a stronger voice, he announced, I'll just smack some sense into him is all. He was gone in a blue flash. Temari stared at the spot before shaking her head with a small smile. She reached into her hip pouch and took out some medical supplies. As she tended to her side, she muttered with a fond smile, Baka. She wholeheartedly believed Naruto would stop her brother without killing her. XXXXXXX. Naruto flashed back to the tree he had put his mark on. He took stock of the situation and nodded, satisfied. His teammate had managed to survive against Gaara in his absence. Sasuke frantically dodged Gaara's sand claw. Just where was Naruto? Gaara screamed, why are you running, Uchiha Sasuke? Come face me. Sasuke was about to snap back a reply when another voice called, how about resuming our fight from earlier, Gaara? Both Gaara and Sasuke turned towards the direction of the voice. Sasuke released a long breath of relief while Gaara seemed to get pumped up even more. There was Naruto, standing on a branch with one hand by his side and the other twirling a tri-pronged kunai by its ring. A confident smirk graced his features as he looked Gaara in the eye, not at all unnerved by his toothy grin. Gaara said in a low voice, excellent suggestion, Uzumaki Naruto. Let's make each other feel alive. The last part was shouted in glee as he prepared to attack. Naruto's expression turned serious, and he turned to Sasuke. Sasuke immediately straightened up from the look, though he didn't know why. Get out of here into a safe distance Sasuke, and keep Sakura safe while you're at it. I doubt you can fight any more in your current condition. That was all he said before turning his attention back to Gaara. Sasuke wanted to snap at him for dismissing him like that, but he was smart enough to not do that in the middle of such a fight. Ever since he had begun fighting Gaara, he felt that somehow, Gaara was growing stronger in their fight. He seemed to have a crap ton of chakra like Naruto, while Sasuke had steadily run out of chakra in their fight. Even Chidori had been useless as for it to work. You had to be extremely fast, faster than your opponent and catch him off guard. One of those conditions was sadly negated, partially due to his own stupid bravado of wanting to face Gaara in the open. Also, Sasuke had struck only sand, which had reformed, causing no real damage to Gaara. He was more than glad to let Naruto take over. Retreating to a safe distance, he settled to observe Naruto fight. Naruto jammed the kunai in his hand on the branch he was standing on. He put his hands in both of his pouches and in 3 quick draws, he scattered all the remaining Hiraishin kunai all over the area. Gaara seemed unaffected by this development, while Sasuke was closely examining one of the kunai that had lodged right in front of him. Was this the reason Naruto was able to get from one place to another in almost an instant? He looked around, and upon seeing Naruto was concentrating on Gaara, he deftly took the lodged kunai out and put it in his pouch. He would examine it later. Naruto pulled out the kunai he had jammed near him and took a stance. He already had set up his field, all he had to do was get Gaara into position. He channeled wind chakra into his kunai and jumped at Gaara, deliberately going slow enough so Gaara would be able to aim his attack at him. Sure enough, Gaara did exactly as he wanted him to. Soon a shuriken. A hail of shuriken made of sand came racing towards him while he was in midair. He flashed to one of his kunai at the last second, right above Gaara. The sand shuriken completely missed their targets, crashing into some trees behind where Naruto was standing. Gaara looked around, trying to find out where Naruto had vanished to. Oi! The call made him look upwards, where Naruto was crouched upside down. He waved cheekily at Gaara before vanishing once again. This time, he appeared right in front of Gaara, who snarled and made a hand sign. Multiple mouths appeared all over his body, which took a deep breath as one. Fudan. Mugen Sajin Daitapa. A huge dust storm blew towards Naruto, who simply flashed to another kunai, which was on a tree behind Gaara. Gaara grit his teeth and once again looked around to find Naruto. Are you that incompetent? You can't even catch me with your eyes, let alone your jutsu. Gaara whipped around and sure enough, Naruto was standing on a branch with a taunting grin. Gaara's tolerance finally snapped. He was used to playing around with his stronger opponents before crushing them to death. But this time, his opponent was playing with him and was brave enough to taunt him. He would show him just who he was messing with. With a roar, he jumped towards Naruto with the intent of tearing him into pieces right where he was standing. Naruto grinned. Gaara was so easy to rile up. Jamming his kunai on the ground between his legs, he fell into a stance as if preparing to tackle Gaara. Just when Gaara's claw was about to make contact with his face, he flashed to another kunai, away from Gaara. Sasuke watched with awe and jealousy as Naruto neatly avoided all of Gaara's attacks, looking at complete ease. It seemed that the seal on the kunai was some sort of beacon for Naruto to flash to. Whatever it was, Sasuke was sure to crack it later for himself. If he could learn the secrets of that kunai, he would be able to fight on par with Naruto. Turning his attention back to the fight, Naruto seemed to be waiting for Gaara to summon into a specific position, and if Sasuke knew one thing about his teammate, it was that Naruto was a master at setting traps up. He watched with anticipation as Gaara snapped and bodily rushed at Naruto, intent on crushing him by himself. Naruto dropped the kunai and looked as if he was preparing to engage Gaara hand to hand. At the last second, he flashed to one of his kunai, neatly dodging Gaara's attack. Just what was the blonde planning? Naruto smirked as Gaara released a roar of frustration as he once again missed him. He took out a regular kunai, wrapping a regular explosive tag around it. After all, he only wanted to weaken his armor. He made a promise to Temari to not kill her brother. He would be breaking that promise if he blew Gaara's ass to chunks with one of his own tags. Nasty. Anyways, he flashed back, this time, right behind Gaara. Without waiting for his tail to react, Naruto jabbed the kunai on a spot right below his tail. Right here. Gaara reacted to the poke first, then the voice. As soon as he heard the voice, he immediately swung his tail to smack Naruto away, but Naruto was no longer there. Naruto had flashed to a kunai a few trees away, grinning at the blast that covered Gaara. He felt Sasuke land beside him, saying in disbelief, "You poked him in the ass," with an explosive kunai. Naruto scowled and turned to him. "It worked, didn't it? I don't see why you are complaining." He then turned around, looking at the giant remnant of a sand claw grabbing Sakura in what looked to be a very painful hold. He stepped to the claw and placed a palm against it. Yep, it was rock solid. To Sasuke's amazement, Naruto seemed to channel red lightning onto the sandy rock. He was about to stop him, telling him that he might hit Sakura with her lightning, when cracks appeared in the claw around Sakura. It then shattered, freeing Sakura. Naruto caught her before she could faceplant on the branch. He handed her to an open-mouthed Sasuke. How did you that? Naruto waved a hand. Not the time, Sasuke. Maybe later. He then flashed away to a kunai that was on the tree right before the one on which the explosion occurred. He whistled, thoroughly impressed at the results of the explosion. The entire right half of Gaara's armor had collapsed, and the other half was barely holding on. Naruto wasted no time in seizing this chance. Ever since he arrived in this area, he had dispersed a moderate amount his own chakra in the air. Grasping that chakra, he entirely converted it to water. Dog Tiger, Suiden. Dai Suigaten no Jutsu. Just as it had happened with Jiraiya, a huge spinning drill of water took form behind Naruto, going above him and rushing down towards a dumbstruck Gaara. He was so focused on recovering and reforming his armor that the water drill had caught him completely off guard. He couldn't even move when the drill crashed into him right into his stomach, with brutal force. To Naruto's immense satisfaction, Gaara impacted the ground with such force, that when the drill finally dispersed, Gaara had been buried into the ground in a crater that was shaped like his own body. All the sand that had been reformed had dispersed from his body, even the sand that was left after the explosion. The only thing that indicated that Gaara was still using his Biju chakra were his eyes. Naruto narrowed his eyes, and the kanji for the 5 elements seal once again formed on his fingertips. He dropped down from the branch, hand once again outstretched. Gaara was angry and confused. Uzumaki had once again put his sand out of commission. He was now dropping from the branch, heading towards him with his hand outstretched and his fingertips glowing. His mother was shouting in his head to do something. Gaara, I want him dead. Use my power, and crush him for good. Give me his blood. All the stress, attacks from Naruto, his failed attempts to draw blood and patience going towards negative finally did it for Gaara. I won't lose to you, Uzumaki Naruto. Naruto was within 5 meters from Gaara's now exposed stomach when his danger sense rang haywire. He instinctively flashed to the farthest kunai, which surprisingly turned out to be Temari. Temari jumped when Naruto suddenly appeared beside her. She put a hand on her chest, heart pumping wildly. You really shouldn't startle people like that. Naruto shot back, that's the only purpose I do it. What are you doing here anyways? I thought you were injured. His gaze turned quizzical. Temari folded her arms. I was able to heal myself with the medical supplies I had and what little I knew of medical jutsu. Truthfully speaking, she was downright impressed with the way Naruto had handled Gaara. Not many knew of the weak spot Naruto had chosen to exploit. Most of the times, they were busy escaping Gaara's attempts to kill them. Naruto had not only bested Gaara's attacks, but had managed to corner him twice. Naruto nodded and turned back where Gaara was. It seemed he had flashed for good reason, for Gaara was no longer there. In his place, a huge raccoon made of sand stood, towering clear above the forest. They seemed like ants in its comparison. A huge amount of chakra had been molded, right before Naruto had flashed away. Naruto stared at the one-tailed tanuki with unusually grave eyes. This is quite bad, he muttered. Temari gave him a look like he had lost his mind, quite. This is very, very bad. You can't stop him when he goes into this form. Suddenly, Naruto turned around and blocked a shuriken that was meant for Temari. Sasuke appeared one branch away, clearly angry. What are you doing, Naruto? She is the enemy. Naruto held a hand to calm the Avenger down. She isn't our enemy anymore, Sasuke. Don't attack her. Sasuke's expression turned confused. What do you mean? Naruto then tilted his head towards the giant tanuki. We have bigger problems to deal with, that's why. Sasuke grit his teeth and angrily gestured to the tanuki. How the hell are you going to stop that? Naruto then turned away and looked up, all 3 of them tensing when he saw its head turning to face them. He quickly said, both of you, get away from here as far and as fast as you can. Temari spoke the question before Sasuke did, what about you? Naruto gave her a discreet wink, whispering, trust me. Out loud, he spoke, I have a plan. Now go. Sasuke looked reluctant to leave Naruto behind, so did Temari, but they still followed his command. Sasuke turned around and tree-hopped away, Sakura safe in his arms. Temari was about to go as well when Naruto whispered to her, "Keep a safe distance from Sasuke. Even though I told him not to attack you, he still might do it." Temari nodded and was about to jump when she noticed she couldn't move. Naruto and her both looked down in horror to see both of their feet stuck in sand, with the sand crawling up their bodies. Naruto acted on instinct. He quickly put a hand on Temari's back and sent her to the farthest point he could, which he sensed was moving away. He had no time to ponder on that because he was completely covered by sand. Gaara watched in his Biju form from above as he finally had Uzumaki Naruto in his grasp, and this time, there was no escape. He clutched his claw into a fist. Sabaku Q. Usually when he used the desert coffin, blood would explode outwards, along with the muscles and organs. It always gave Gaara great pleasure to use it. But this time, instead of blood, only smoke seemed to come out. Gaara was confused. Why did smoke come out? Temari had been utterly surprised when one moment, she was standing beside Naruto, her feet stuck in sand. The next moment, she had suddenly appeared mid-air beside Uchiha Sasuke. Sasuke was equally surprised, and nearly lost his footing on the next branch. Temari was barely able to land on her legs, let alone make a graceful landing. Temari was not so surprised, since she had witnessed Naruto send Shikamaru down for their fight the same way, using Hiraishin. Sasuke on the other hand, was stunned on a much higher level. He can even send people through that jutsu. If he sent her here, does he know that I have one of his kunai? Did Naruto send you? Temari looked at Sasuke and scowled. For some reason, she hated that bastard. Yeah, he did. However, all her breath left her lungs when she heard the gravelly voice of Gaara, amplified in his Biju form. Sabaku Q. No, Temari thought with eyes full of terror as she turned back to the area of the fight. She almost expected Naruto to flash beside her, easily avoiding the one-hit kill. Seconds trickled by, and the blood fully drained from her face. Gaara had killed Naruto. Sasuke froze on the branch for a completely different reason. While he had undoubtedly displayed potent jealousy towards Naruto for having techniques far superior to his own, he still considered Naruto his comrade, and Naruto was the closest thing to a friend that Sasuke had. Back in the stadium, his thoughts had been clouded with hatred and jealousy. But while fighting Gaara, the cloud had somewhat shifted, and he had gained respect for the blonde to handle Gaara the way he did. Naruto may have been a genius, but that alone doesn't make you powerful. Sasuke trained his ass off daily to get stronger. For Naruto to be this strong, he must have worked way harder than him. Which meant only one thing. Sasuke would do anything he could to catch up to Naruto. Anything. But witnessing the death of that comrade made him reflect back to their belt test. Kakashi had told them that people who broke the rules are scum, but those who abandon their comrades are worse than scum. He had abandoned Naruto to face his death, even if the blonde had told him to go himself. Itachi had abandoned the entire Leaf and by extension, his comrades. Sasuke had abandoned his comrade. Oh God, did that mean they were the same? Before more horror could fill his being, a scream of horror from Temari snapped him out of his thoughts. Naruto. Temari wanted to deny all of it. She wanted to deny that Naruto had fallen prey to Gaara's sand, but the truth was right in front of her, as if mocking her for not being able to do anything. She had these strange feelings growing inside her ever since she started meeting Naruto in the week before the exams. Feelings that she couldn't make any sense out of. She didn't meet him just because she wanted to learn his secrets for her village, no. She genuinely enjoyed spending time with him. He had become a sort companion that she never wanted to let go of, but reality struck hard. Naruto. Suddenly, a huge amount of smoke appeared before them, causing both of them to gape. The amount of smoke released was large, easily large enough that it could cover the giant tanuki. Only, it wasn't a tanuki that emerged from the smoke. XXXXXXX. Naruto barely been able to make a shadow clone in time. However, he did it so fast that he doubted someone could have seen him doing it, even if they were standing in front of him. He had created the shadow clone with specific orders in mind. As soon as the clone flickered into existence, it vanished from its spot near instantaneously, Flash stepping behind a tree. Then, it substituted with the Prime, taking his place inside the coffin. It grinned when he thought what Gaara's reaction would be when he saw that Prime had managed to escape. It was its last thought before dispelling into smoke. Behind a tree, Naruto was preparing his next technique. It was the only one he could think of that could deal with Gaara's current form, and hopefully, it would be one of the last he would ever have to use against Gaara. Cutting his left thumb, he swiped it against his right palm. Boar dog bird monkey ram. Kuchio's no jutsu. Before the exam, he had calculated that he required exactly a quarter of his reserves to summon Takeshi. However, after Kurama had increased his reserves, the amount had dropped significantly. The quarter of his previous amount of reserves that he previously required had now become 2/3 of the same quarter, which meant an entire 1/6 of his reserves. Of course, Naruto had roughly estimated this with Kurama's help. In a huge blast of smoke, Naruto towered above the tree line, easily standing a head above the tanuki on top of Takeshi's head. He had his arms crossed as he looked down on Shukaku's form. It gave him a sense of authority, of power. Takeshi blinked as he appeared with his arms crossed. He quickly deduced that Naruto had summoned him. "Ah, it seems you require my assistance, Naruto." Naruto lightly laughed on top of Takeshi's head. "Very acute observation, Takeshi-san." Takeshi chuckled at his summoner's cheek before turning a serious, yet still a bit amused eye forward. Quote, "Ikibi no Shukaku, huh? You sure to have an eye for strong opponents, Naruto. This might turn out to be a good fight after all." Takeshi grinned, his sharp teeth menacingly coming into view as he grasped the katana strapped onto the left side of his waist in anticipation. Naruto nodded and explained his plan to the boss of the foxes. Right now, the Jinchuriki is in the final state of his transformation, but still in control. Our goal is to influence him enough that he would relish the control over to the tailed beast via falling asleep. Once Shukaku's consciousness is in control, I want you to hold him in one place while I wake up the host. Once Gaara is awake, I will slap a seal onto him that will cut him off from his tailed beast. Takeshi listened carefully to Naruto's plan, and nodded in agreement. He couldn't help but comment, however, fighting an opponent like Shukaku at their strongest. You really know how to bring excitement into a fight, Naruto. Takeshi was clearly excited to fight. He did not wait for his opponent to make his move. Naruto was glad he had stuck to Takeshi's head using his chakra, otherwise he would have fallen backwards on his butt. Just as Takeshi came within striking distance, Gaara reacted. Shukaku's arm came forward to grab Takeshi's throat, but he wasn't fast enough. Instead of dodging the arm, Takeshi unsheathed his katana and in one clean stroke, Gaara's entire right arm came straight off. XXXXXXX. Temari stared in amazement at what Naruto had managed to pull out of his sleeve this time. It was a humongous, dark blue fox in a white haori, with 7 tails swaying behind magnificently. And it was large enough to tower over the tanuki. What is that? She uttered in disbelief. Was it one of Naruto's summons? Sasuke was in a similar state. He was at a loss of words for this, whatever Naruto had managed to pull off. But whatever it was superior to even the tanuki in size. It was clearly very strong. The 7 swaying tails had fully thrown him off. With the exchange of words that followed, Sasuke was able to deduce that this was a summon, which meant that Naruto was the holder of a summoning contract. He couldn't hear what Naruto said, but it was clearly a signal to start fighting. Both Sasuke and Temari then proceeded to watch. Utterly dumbstruck and stupefied, the giant blue fox cleanly cut one of Gaara's arms. XXXXXXX. Takeshi skidded away, destroying a group of trees in his wake and not even noticing. His eyes narrowed as he clutched his blade tightly. Quote, "His body is denser than I had thought. I nearly lost the grip of my blade," he said as he put the katana back in its sheath. "We'll have to be more careful now. This should be provocation enough for him to let Shukaku out. Get ready, Naruto." "Yeah." Naruto nodded and braced himself. He carefully watched Gaara as he slowly reattached his arm. Once he had done so, he turned his head towards them. "Interesting," he rumbled, causing both Takeshi and Naruto to tense. "How interesting, Uzumaki Naruto." They watched as Gaara came out of the giant tanuki's head in a ripple, his eyes completely white. Naruto supposed that was because his sight was in the tanuki's eyes. He was slumped, but slowly straightened up. Naruto was further on guard when he saw Gaara smiling a little. He knew what came next, but no matter how many times he saw Gaara smile, it was always unnerving. You are strong, Uzumaki, Gaara said, and Naruto could hear anticipation in his voice. You have matched my every attack with yours, and were able to overpower me, if only for a little while. I haven't had this much fun in all my life. The last shout caused Naruto to feel a bit sad inside. He couldn't help but reflect that this was how he could have ended up. Gaara had been alienated most of his life. He could see that only Temari had attempted to make Gaara feel as close to family as possible, but he had ruthlessly pushed her away. They say that you can learn a lot about a person from fighting them, and it was true. Naruto had seen how Gaara fought. Gaara only fought for himself. He thought that he had no precious people of his own. Well, Naruto was about to give him a smackdown for free, in addition to a reality check. Gaara formed the ram seal. As my gratitude towards you for keeping me entertained, I'll let you see the full power of the sand incarnation. Feigning sleep jutsu. For a moment, Gaara remained frozen in that pose, mad eyes glaring into Naruto's prepared ones. And then, he sagged, arms hanging limply as his head fell forward. Here we go, Takeshi-san, Naruto whispered to the fox, who hummed low in agreement. XXXXXXX. Sasuke shivered with a little fear. This wasn't the first time he had watched his teammate take on a stronger opponent than any of them, while he just cowered in the background. Looking up at Gaara's form, he took back his words. Gaara had a lot more chakra than what he estimated. To have enough chakra to form a construct like that, he doubted even Naruto had that much chakra. Temari watched fearfully as Naruto tackled Gaara at his strongest. As confident as Naruto seemed, she doubted he could scrape victory when Gaara let Shukaku out to fight. But Naruto looked so sure of his victory, like he knew exactly what to do, that Temari simply had to trust he knew what he was doing. She couldn't bear to lose both Naruto and Gaara in the same day. XXXXXXX. Yahoo! Finally, I am out and free. The one-tailed monster opened its enormous jaw, and the high, crazy voice surprised Naruto a bit. He had been imagining a voice similar to Kurama's. Shukaku looked in front of him and cheered, coiling in preparation for an attack. Oh. A guy for me to kill already. And it looks like you're related to that asshole Kyuubi. I'll make mincemeat out of you. Naruto winced as Kurama roared in rage inside him. He really couldn't be sure if Shukaku was referring to him or Takeshi. Probably Takeshi. You know, because of his tails. Takeshi gave a challenging grin full of teeth. Why don't you put those words to test? Let's see how far you can get. Shukaku slapped his large, bloated stomach. Fuuton, Renkudan. A bullet of air so compressed and pressurized came shooting towards Takeshi, who surprised both Naruto and Shukaku when he deftly used one of his tails to smack away the air bullet at just the right angle. He just shifted its direction a bit, so instead of damaging the landscape, it went flying into the sky behind him. My turn. Takeshi grinned before performing three-hand seals, ending on Tiger. He took a deep breath. Kaden, Goen no Jutsu. An enormous vortex of rapidly expanding flames expelled from his mouth and rushed towards Shukaku. The heat from the flames was so hot that even Naruto, who was standing behind the wall of fire, felt it. The entire land of forest beneath the majestic flame was scorched to ashes. Naruto was willing to bet that the fire was hot enough to turn Shukaku's sand to glass. Shukaku, as soon as he saw the Herculean fire heading towards him, erected a huge wall of sand with his hand. He would have dodged it normally, but because of his huge bulk, he was slow to put himself to motion. It was better to have a hand turned to glass rather than any other part of his body. The flames hit the wall of sand, and for a full 5 seconds, Takeshi kept pumping chakra into his fire, making it hotter in each second. When he finally released the jutsu, both Naruto and Takeshi grinned at the results. XXXXXXX. Temari gaped in speechlessness as the wall that Shukaku had erected with his hand had completely melted into hot, molten liquid. The amount of firepower that summon seemed to have was completely absurd and ridiculous. Sasuke was also dumbstruck at the new development. The heat from the summon's fire had been hot enough to be felt way over where they were standing. He had seen what had happened to the forest beneath it, and he almost felt bad for anything standing in front of it. XXXXXXX. Shukaku winced as he saw his entire hand was now molten sand, which was slowly melting from the solid shape that he had formed it into. However, before he could do anything about it, he heard another shout. Fuuton, kamikaze. A huge amount of wind was expelled from Takeshi's mouth. It had no shape, it simply was wind blowing at great speeds. Since the sand construct was still melting, Shukaku didn't have enough time to detach himself from it. Takeshi took full advantage of it and chose to cool down the molten sand, transforming it into glass. Shukaku looked at his hand in disbelief. His whole right arm, that was still attached to his body, had become solid glass. It was rather surreal to see. Takeshi laughed, "Make mincemeat out of me. Take a look at yourself first." And with speed that even Naruto did not expect from him, he shot forward in 3 quick strides. Naruto was stunned just how quickly Takeshi was able to move. However, his next choice of attack almost had Naruto jumping in joy. Takeshi had reared back his fist and punched right at the strange-shaped wall of glass. Shukaku had no choice but to block the punch with his now wall of glass, formerly wall of sand. If he could get rid of the glass, he could form a new hand then, he would kill this blasted fox. The glass shattered like, well, glass. It shattered into pieces. The part of the arm that had become glass was almost up to his shoulder. So almost the entire arm shattered under the tremendous force of Takeshi's punch. Shukaku was now visibly panicking. He swung his good left arm, claws outstretched to swipe Takeshi's head off, but Takeshi was quick to counter. Takeshi grabbed the left arm with his right, followed by grabbing the swinging tail that came from Shukaku's right. Takeshi held them in a strong grip, not allowing Shukaku any chance to attack. Well, if you don't count the regenerating arm and the purple ball of no doubt, highly destructive chakra that was forming in front of Shukaku's mouth, aimed right onto Takeshi's alarmed face. Do it now, Naruto. You really don't want to be at the other end of that thing. Takeshi's warning had a high amount of urgency in it, and Naruto did not want to find out what that ball of chakra did, so he didn't hesitate to act. He directed his chakra into his legs and jumped high. With a grunt, he threw the kunai downwards, aiming it so it lodged right in front of an asleep Gaara. As expected, Gaara's sand came up to catch the kunai, but it was of no consequence. Naruto flashed right in front of Gaara, already in motion of an attack. He caught Gaara's jaw in an earth-shattering right hook, which had so much force behind it that it not only sent Gaara leaning towards his own right, but also knocked a tooth out of his mouth. Wake the fuck up. The punch sent waves of pain to Gaara's brain, forcing him to wake up. His eyes flew open in agony, just as Naruto sensed the big ball of chakra harmlessly dispelling behind him. Shukaku's yell soon followed, "No. I just came out." Gaara was now wide awake, but Naruto gave him no chance to attack him with his sand. He used his left hand to roughly grab Gaara by his throat, bringing his face level to his. His fingertips of the right hand lit up in the Gogyo Fuin for the 3rd time in the day. He slapped them right onto Gaara's exposed stomach, the usage of chakra making his seal visible. Gaara gasped as all the breath left him, and he momentarily became unconscious. Naruto had successfully managed to cut Shukaku off from Gaara's conscious. The sand form beneath them began to crumble, and just in seconds, the entire body of sand collapsed, making them plummet to earth. Naruto and Gaara would have hit the ground with bone-breaking force, if Naruto hadn't managed to grab Gaara mid-air and flash to a kunai on the ground. He carefully set Gaara against a tree, and was slightly taken aback when Gaara started to stir. He himself had needed a day to wake up when Orochimaru had slapped him with the same seal. Perhaps it was that due to Gaara's stronger connection to Shukaku, he already had large amounts of Biju chakra in his system which helped him wake. Naruto stood over Gaara as the redhead fully opened his eyes. Looking disoriented for a second, his eyes widened as he saw Naruto standing over him with an expressionless look on his face. He tried to shift further into the tree. "No, stay away from me," he cried weakly, far too weak to try and move his body. He watched with pure fear as Naruto knelt down. Naruto softened the look on his face. That pain. Of being alone, of your life not meaning anything to anyone. I know that pain all too well, Gaara. Gaara whispered in confusion, how? Naruto's lips twisted into a sad smile, because we are alike. I also house a beast like yours. Gaara's confused expression twisted into one of shock. Then, for all those people, why? Naruto put a hand on Gaara's tuft of hair, because I found people to care for, to protect. Who loved me and acknowledged my existence. Those people told me as many times I needed to hear, that they loved me. They told me that my purpose in this world was to protect. True power doesn't come from fighting for yourself. It comes when you have someone of your own to protect. Gaara, he ruffled the red hair, you have people like that too. If you'd just give them a chance, they would accept you. If you want, I'll be your first friend. Gaara was unable to answer, just staring at Naruto with wide eyes. Naruto chuckled and removed his hand, standing up. They were here anyways. Temari and Kankuro appeared just beside Gaara. The difference was that Kankuro was injured, and still on guard when standing in front of Naruto. He looked at Naruto with a wary expression, knowing that he stood no chance against a guy who still didn't look that exhausted after outright crushing Gaara. Temari on the other hand, just stared at Naruto with wide eyes. He had delivered on his promise. He had stopped Gaara without killing him. And she was grateful to him for that. Naruto looked at her and winked. I promised you, didn't I? Temari smiled softly and nodded. She was grateful that Gaara hadn't been killed, along with the fact that Gaara hadn't managed to kill Naruto. She didn't know if she could ever repay Naruto for what he had done for her. A hand brushed against her leg, causing her to look down. Temari, Kankuro. That's enough, let's go home, Gaara ordered weakly. Kankuro gave a confused look to Temari, who just nodded to comply with the request. He picked Gaara up, supporting him with one hand around his waist and the other holding Gaara's over his shoulder. Kankuro, Temari said, causing the puppeteer to look at her, take Gaara and move. I'll catch up. She did not once break eye contact with Naruto. Kankuro gave her a confused look, but Temari, go, I said. Kankuro looked reluctant to leave her behind, but obeyed her nonetheless. He took to the trees and in a few moments, they were just a dot in the distance. No doubt, Kankuro would wait ahead for her to catch up, but he knew when Temari wanted him to be out of sight, and he wasn't stupid enough to disobey her. Naruto just kept his hands in his pockets as Temari stepped closer. Somehow, he wasn't surprised at all when Temari suddenly grabbed him in a tight hug, her hands going around his waist and her head buried in his chest. Thank you, she was sobbing in his chest. Naruto slowly wrapped his own arms around her shoulders. He kissed her head softly, stroking her hair. It's okay, he whispered. He really didn't know what else he could do. Temari tightened her hold on him. Why would you go so far for him? Naruto breathed deeply, trying to decide what to say. He and I, we're not much different. We both share a burden, and we both have been alone in our lives. Me not as much as him. I just couldn't bear to look at him like he was. He is what I would have been if I had no people of my own. He has people of his own. He has me and Kankuro. Naruto nodded sadly, but he chose to push you away, while I accepted the few people I had in my life. It's still not too late, Temari. Just keep showing him what love truly means, and he will come to you. Give him another chance to accept. Temari slowly looked up to him with tears glistening in her eyes. Naruto slowly removed his arms from her, stepping back. You should go now. Konoha Shinobi might be here any moment. Temari pursed her lips, but nodded. She turned away, about to jump to the trees, but she hesitated. Naruto waited for Temari to jump away, but she looked hesitating. Temari. He never finished his sentence, for a pair of lips came to softly rest on his own. Naruto looked shocked only for a moment, but before he could wrap his arms around her, Temari separated and turned away, taking to the trees. Naruto's hand came to rub on his lips, feeling the taste of her own. He smiled. There was something else in that kiss. Something that promised a better future. Still smiling, he turned around, only to freeze on spotting Sasuke, who was carrying Sakura in a piggyback. Sasuke was looking extremely shocked and confused. He did not know what or how to make sense out of this. What the hell was that? Naruto panicked for a second, but then got a grip and replied, a kiss, what else could it be? He turned around to go and gather his kunai, but Sasuke stopped him again. No. I mean, why did she kiss you? Naruto turned around with a frown. I don't know what goes on in her head. But what the hell are you doing here? Weren't you supposed to take Sakura and head back to safety? This time, Sasuke surprised Naruto by looking abashed of all things. He muttered something unintelligible, causing Naruto to raise an eyebrow. Sorry, couldn't hear you. Come again. I said I couldn't leave you behind. Okay, Sasuke snapped, a hint of red on his cheeks. Naruto snorted and walked past the boy. It's rare to see you worry about someone else. But don't worry about me. As long as you have that kunai with you, I can flash to you anytime. Naruto suspected Sasuke had taken the kunai not so Naruto could flash to him, but to decipher the secret behind it. Sasuke wasn't an idiot, He obviously had noticed it in his fight with Gaara what he used the kunai for, and he wanted the jutsu for himself. Too bad for him. In his notes, Minato had written down that he had taken the jutsu to levels that were seemingly impossible. He had developed it so far that in fact, it almost became a sort of an artificial bloodline. A jutsu that could only be used by someone of his blood, that too counting in all the fuinjutsu processes that involved locking your chakra at each step. Sasuke mentally flinched at that. He forgot to take into account that Naruto could sense all of his kunai. He had to divert the topic fast before Naruto asks him to give it back. Why did you let them go? That question caught Naruto's attention as he picked the last of the Hiraishin kunai scattered on the ground. He slowly turned to face Sasuke. He opened his mouth to explain why, but stopped at the sudden rush of chakra in his system, as well as memories. What the hell? Sasuke watched curiously as Naruto's head snapped towards the direction of the stadium, a classic expression of, what the fuck, on his face. What is it? Naruto turned to face Sasuke, a sense of urgency on his face that wasn't there before. You need to get back to Kakashi, right now. He stepped forward, a hand outstretched, probably to send him to Kakashi. Sasuke stepped back. Whoa. You are not sending me back like that. Not until you tell me why. Naruto grit his teeth as more memories flowed into his mind. He did not have time for this. I can't tell you right now because someone close to me is in danger. How about this? I'll tell you once the invasion is over and you promise me, right now, that you won't tell a soul about this until I tell you so. Deal. Sasuke thought over it a bit and said, alright, but you better telephone. He wasn't allowed to finish as Naruto put a hand on his forehead and forcefully sent him back to where Kakashi was. He might have finished the enemies in the stadium by now. He flashed, and within 10 seconds, he had gathered every kunai that had been scattered in the area. After inspecting the clearing for one last time, he flashed again. Hold on Gigi. I'm coming. XXXXXXX. Temari and Kankuro were supporting Gaara on each of his sides as they made their way back to Suna. With Gaara's defeat, the invasion was moot. Naruto made a good point about Gaara, she thought. They allowed Gaara to push them away, and her efforts had been clearly not enough to make him come back to her. Gaara had pushed them away as well. Their father, in hopes of strengthening Gaara as fast as he could, sent assassins to kill him. While none could get past his sand, Gaara still wanted to be close to them. However, something happened, and suddenly, Gaara became the cold person he was. He cared only about himself. She figured that the amount of killing attempts finally broke him, convincing that no one would care for him, or acknowledge his existence. Then Naruto came along and unlike anyone they had ever met, proceeded to beat Gaara into the ground until he was willing to hear what Naruto had to say. Temari knew that Naruto had changed Gaara's outlook on life permanently. She had witnessed hope in Gaara's life for the first time in years. Hope that he could make a life for himself like Naruto had did. Temari, Kankuro, a voice snapped her out of her thoughts. She turned her head to face Gaara, who was still not meeting her eyes. Kankuro shot a questioning look at his sister, but his confusion turned to shock when Gaara uttered a single word, sorry. Both the older siblings were shocked that Gaara apologized to them. For years, Gaara viewed everyone as beneath him. For him to apologize, it meant Naruto's words had had a deep effect on him. Temari smiled. They were in Naruto's debt for this. It's okay, little brother. XXXXXXX. Kakashi looked tiredly around the stadium. A large number of bodies were littered around almost in every part of the arena, either covered in blood or outright crushed. He blamed Guy for all of this. That man seemed to make everything a competition between them, and for some reason that even he doesn't know, Kakashi always indulged in those things. Guy had made a bet that he could kill more enemies than Kakashi. Kakashi, being the dutiful, eternal that he was, agreed to the bet. After almost an hour of continuous fighting, the enemy had finally stopped coming into the stadium. Guy was standing on the other side of the arena. He waved energetically at Kakashi. Yo, Kakashi. How much is your count? Is there an end to his youth? Kakashi tiredly thought, but answered anyway. 57, he answered in a bored tone. Just as he predicted, Guy shifted to a completely different personality. Oh Kakashi. It seems you have won again, my eternal rival. It was no secret in Konoha that he and Guy were eternal rivals. Kakashi was thankful for his face mask every time Guy chose to announce their rivalry publicly. That man had no sense of stealth whatsoever. People already questioned if he was mentally fit to be a ninja, it won't do for them to start questioning him as well. Kakashi mentally sighed. His best friend was a pain in the ass. Just as he was about to approach Guy, Sasuke suddenly appeared beside him, with Sakura unconscious on his back. Kakashi already had a kunai out ready, but lowered it once he saw who it was. He watched, amused, as Sasuke blinked, no doubt disoriented from the sudden travel, and proceeded to curse in a way that Kakashi almost blushed. Though he couldn't hold back the perverted giggle upon seeing his student's position. That asshole. I told him not to do that, Sasuke shouted before spotting Kakashi. He raised an eyebrow in deadpan upon hearing the perverted giggle. What is it? Kakashi was more than happy to point it out. I wonder what you plan on doing with her, Sasuke. Especially you are carrying her when she's unconscious. Sasuke blinked, not understanding the reference at first. Then he remembered that his sensei was a pervert, and then his face suddenly turned red. Don't make such useless assumptions, you perverted jerk. Kakashi refrained from commenting that this might be proof of a claim Naruto had made some time ago. He might be gay, after all. He then turned to face the purple barrier in which his leader was trapped. He could only hope that Sandaime would manage to survive against his former student. XXXXXXX. Things were not going well for Hiruzen. Orochimaru had been right. He was not as strong as he was 10 years ago, let alone his prime. And it showed. His movements were slow. His chakra capacity, even though it hadn't deteriorated with age, he had a limit to what he could exert now. If he exerted more, his chakra coils were in danger of permanent damage. And don't even get him started on his old joints. He and Orochimaru engaged first in taijutsu, which rapidly progressed into ninjutsu. At one point, Hiruzen had even managed to corner his student again. With a smirk he had thought, looks like I still got it. Got it, his ass. Orochimaru had blocked his attacks by pulling up coffins of all things. From then on, it was no longer funny. In fact, Hiruzen was outraged that Orochimaru had the nerve and spine to do such a vile thing. Orochimaru had defiled the graves of both of his senseis. Hiruzen had watched with horror-filled eyes as Orochimaru opened the graves to allow the now resurrected Shodai and Nadaime Hokage to walk out. And they looked terrible. Both of their skin was deathly pale, as it was rightly so. Orochimaru had forcefully called the dead into the land of the living. Hiruzen had to stop himself from facepalming when the former Hokages finally opened their mouths to speak. Even though Hiruzen knew that Hashirama-sensei was a peculiar man, with his unusually boisterous and seemingly idiotic nature, it was Tobirama-sensei who knew Hiruzen the best. It was scary how easily he could read his student. Hiruzen even suspected that Tobirama knew that he was a closet pervert, but he didn't really know, for the man never called him out on it. Only Hashirama knew of that fact, and even he had found out by accident. But enough of that. The first words that Hashirama-sensei had spoken were, "Is that you, Sarutobi?" It has been a long time. Hiruzen had cringed how much dead he had sounded. But somehow, that same tone from Tobirama didn't surprise him at all. In fact, it was all he could do from facepalming. You have gotten old, Saru. That man was always blunt like that. Turns out, it was an extremely vile jutsu that had been created by Tobirama. Edo Tensei was a jutsu that binds the soul of a deceased person to a living vessel, restoring the deceased as they were when they were alive in order to do their summoner's bidding. It was the ultimate insult one can give to the dead. Why Tobirama-sensei created this, he would never know. And how Orochimaru got a hold of this, that also he would never know. Ultimately, Hiruzen had no choice but to fight his former senseis. As the fight between them progressed, Hiruzen noted that while his opponents were certainly strong, they were nowhere near the level they were when they were alive. They were merely puppets that Orochimaru was controlling. Hiruzen would know, he was their prized student, after all. But even then, Hiruzen slowly found himself on the losing side of the battle as his age and lack of training in a long time slowly took a toll on him. Even after summoning Enma, who became an indestructible adamantine staff, he was put on the ropes by the Shadai's mastery of Mokuten and Nadaime's mastery of Suiten. Even if they were puppets, their teamwork was strong enough that Hiruzen was hard-pressed to just dodge those attacks. And if things weren't bad enough already, both the bodies of the former Hokages were seemingly indestructible. Any damage dealt to them was recovered from within seconds. This is bad. At this rate, I really would be killed. I cannot afford to let them escape this barrier. Konoha would never recover from being destroyed by its own creators, Hiruzen thought as he dodged Tobirama's attacks and used his staff to strike Hashirama in the face. He put some distance between him and both the Hokages with a large-scale Kaden Jutsu. He then suddenly remembered what happened before they started fighting. Of course. How could I have forgotten that? Naruto gave me a scroll, saying that it had some reinforcements. I really could use a soldier pill right now, he set Enma loose on the Hokages, while he untied the scroll. As soon as he saw the slightly changed, but still recognizable prisoner containment seal, he was confused. Why would Naruto want to give him such a scroll right now? But he had not time to think over it as Enma came skidding back on his feet. Whatever you are doing, hurry up Sarutobi. Enma shouted in his gruff voice. Hiruzen wasted no more time and spread the scroll on the ground, pushing chakra into it, choosing to trust Naruto. And boy, Naruto knew exactly well what reinforcements are. Hiruzen stared dumbfounded at the army of blondes, no doubt shadow clones that Naruto created. He knew Naruto had a ridiculous amount of chakra, but this was a whole new level of absurd. He would have to re-evaluate the blonde, if he survived. Orochimaru was flabbergasted as to how did the old fool manage to pull this in the middle of the battle. Then he noticed the scroll in his hand, a prisoner containment scroll modified to seal shadow clones, and the look on his face means someone gave it to him. I don't need to be a genius to figure out who. But no matter, 100 shadow clones against 2 Hokages are nothing. They will only buy the old fool some time. Sadly, Orochimaru was only partially correct. The entire roof became a field for chaos within seconds. The changes that the first Hokage had made to the roof with his entire Mokuden only added to the clones' advantages. They took extreme pleasure in causing as much chaos as possible, with Flash Step and Hiraishin. Hiruzen grabbed this opportunity to rest and chuckled. This certainly was useful, but he could see that having shadow clones as back had its downfalls as well. The Hokages proved how formidable they were, for the clones started dispelling only 2 minutes after they were summoned. Hiruzen knew that this was bad, and there was no way he would be escaping today with his life. He sighed sadly as he thought about his life until today. He had made countless decisions, and just as many mistakes. He regretted what he was about to do, but there was no other option, and he was in no way calling Naruto to fight with him. Just as he was about to initiate the sequence for the jutsu that would seal the dead away, a clone flashed beside him. With so many flashes going around, Hiruzen wasn't even surprised. This backup is going to get destroyed in just 10 seconds, he said testily, watching with growing nervousness as only 20 of them remained now. Hiruzen nodded gravely. When you dispel, pass on my thanks to Naruto. I regret that I won't be escaping alive today. The clone looked at him with a surprised face. Another peculiar thing that Hiruzen had discovered was that each of Naruto's clones had a different personality. One was happy to the point of being goofy, one was lazy, one was an angry one, and there was one that was exactly like Naruto, which was the one thing that he found weird. Considering shadow clones are meant to be the user's exact copies, finding an exact copy among Naruto's different ones was certainly a new experience. This one seemed prone to be surprised every now and then. He wanted to say something, but words seemed to fail him as he could only close and open his mouth repeatedly. He then sighed, and Hiruzen found his worry growing as a determined look came onto his face. If you say that you have no choice, then I'm afraid I have no choice as well. The last clone besides the one was dispelled, and Hiruzen dropped into a stance again, holding Enma. This was his final stand, and he would be damned if he let Orochimaru win. Just as he was about to commence his attack, he saw the last clone beside him making a half-ram's seal, dispelling a second later. What was he up to? He suddenly got a very bad feeling in his stomach. Surely he was not going to. His worst fears were confirmed when in a flash of blue, the Prime himself arrived. With a cocky smirk on his face, no less. Am I late or what? XXXXXXX. The Anbu standing outside were dumbstruck upon seeing Uzumaki Naruto. It was one thing to see his performance in the matches against 2 very formidable genin. It was a whole another thing to see him face off against Orochimaru of the Sannin. Naruto could easily take out an ranked Jonin with what he did in the matches, and the Anbu were willing to bet that what they saw was not even half of what Naruto was truly capable of. But Orochimaru was no ordinary rank opponent. A high S-rank shinobi trained personally by the Sandaime Hokage, he was no joke of an opponent at all. To say the atmosphere was tense was the understatement of the decade. What is he doing? And Anbu barely kept from shouting. The captain narrowed his eyes behind his mask and replied, "There is no doubt that Uzumaki Naruto and the Sandaime share a close bond. The reinforcements he provided him were the proof of that, if you can even call them that. In addition to that, Naruto had successfully anticipated a personal attack on Hokage-sama and prepared accordingly. Now that I think about it, it doesn't surprise me that he was alerted of the battle due to the memories of the numerous Kage Bunshin. One of them must have sent a message to him to personally come here, but he still is just a genin standing in a field of Kage-level shinobi. He would. I think that it is well established by now that Uzumaki Naruto is not an ordinary shinobi at all," the captain calmly refuted. Turning back to the fight, he said in almost a whisper, "We just have to trust him. XXXXXXX." Naruto carefully eyed Orochimaru as he slowly shifted into a stance. This was his second time battling the Sannin, and this time, he won't be pulling anything against him. He could not afford to. However, he had to know something first. "Why did you do it?" Orochimaru was also not quite surprised by Naruto's appearance. His shadow clones must have relayed everything that happened. He used his control on the Edo Tensei to pull back the two Hokage for now. Who knows, he might learn something interesting. "Why did I do what?" Naruto's eyes narrowed in anger. "Don't play games with me. Why did you defile the graves of the previous Hokage? You could have easily matched Hokage-sama, even beaten him, considering he's far from his prime." Orochimaru chuckled, amused by the anger in front of him. "I only found it fitting, and a little ironic that the people responsible for the birth of this village will also be responsible for its death, along with the Aikibi." Naruto felt rage building within him, but he ruthlessly pushed it back. Now was not the time to lose his mind. "I've already received memories of my clones. They did keep you a bit busy, but in the end, they are just clones who can get dispelled in just one hit. So I'll ask you this, what makes you think we'll just let you do what you want?" Orochimaru felt a bit of anxiousness creep into him, like something bad was going to happen. Nonetheless, he didn't let this show on his face, keeping up his amused facade. "You really think you have what it takes to stop me? Edo Tensei has no exploitable weakness as far as anyone knows. I am the only one who knows how to use it in the first place." Naruto smirked, despite the situation he was in. "Be that as it may, you've already lost, Orochimaru of the Sannin. I've already sent the Aikibi running with its tail between his legs." This fact surprised both Orochimaru and Hiruzen. Hiruzen asked him with shock, "The Aikibi has been defeated?" Naruto gave him a side glance. "Of course. I wouldn't be here if he wasn't." Orochimaru found himself growing annoyed. Using Gaara as his weapon was a major part of his plan. To think Naruto managed to defeat him and still have energy left to fight him. He is quickly becoming a pain. He not only manages to defeat Gaara, thereby foiling my invasion by a good margin, but he even gave the old fool some reinforcements that I didn't even know of. If I don't take care of him now, he'll become a full-blown annoyance for me in the future, the snake summoner thought with a frown. Time to end this battle. Be that as it may, he mocked the young Uzumaki, you can't hope to match the might of the Hokages just yet. Maybe in the future, but only if you live through today. With that, he commanded. Naruto chuckled as he pulled out his own scroll. You should know better than that, you reptilian psychopath. Every jutsu has a weakness. He released the contents of the scroll, and Orochimaru had to fight a groan of annoyance upon seeing a very familiar sight. 100 grinning clones once again stood between the two sides of the battlefield. The Hokages halted a bit to reconsider on how to deal with this setback, but Orochimaru forced them to keep going. It's just the matter of finding it. With that, all the clones once again engaged the two cages with glee, using the advantages their predecessors set for them before they ran out. Naruto then turned to Hiruzen with a serious look on his face. Gigi, tell me what you know about this Edo Tensei. My clones weren't able to tell me much. I'll need everything you know to devise a counter against it. Hiruzen took a moment to study Naruto. With his eyes narrowed and his hair flowing in the wind, Hiruzen was once again reminded of Minato. Cold and calculative in battle, Minato had rarely lost against someone, and at his strongest, even Jiraiya had admitted that he could not defeat Minato. To think that his son would grow so powerful as to assist the Hokage in one of his battles, right after defeating a tailed beast. It would be injustice if he were to be promoted to Chunin. Very well. And while the clones did their best to keep the cages and Orochimaru busy, Hiruzen told what he had studied from the Forbidden Scroll and witnessed firsthand. Just as all the clones were once again demolished, Naruto had everything he needed to know. He was now looking at Orochimaru with a predatory smile which was frankly, a bit unnerving. It's a summoning jutsu. You don't say. Before he could act on his plan, he and Hiruzen were surprised when suddenly, Tobirama decided to speak. Whatever you have planned, don't waste time in executing it. Hiruzen blinked a few times. Nadaime-sama, I thought you were under control. He dodged and blocked the dead Hokage's attacks while exchanging words. He only can control my actions, but not my personality. Even though we are compelled to obey his orders, that doesn't mean we can't think and talk for ourselves. And why the hell would you decide to train a student such as that? Hiruzen sighed as Hashirama, who had decided to engage Naruto, himself jumped into the conversation. As always, he was highly eccentric. Naruto called out to his Gigi, just keep him busy, Gigi. I have a way to stop them from attacking. Hiruzen grit his teeth and snapped back, what do you think I have been doing all this while? Naruto turned back to his fight. He was exchanging blows with the Shodai, more like dodging and flipping, was evaluating his position in this fight. With all the Kage Bunshin gone, my chakra capacity is roughly a bit more than a third of my actual reserves. Gigi told me that on top of having monstrous reserves of chakra, both the Senju brothers have an unlimited supply of it in their current state. But they are not fighting at full strength, which means we still have a chance. Naruto substituted with a clone seamlessly in the middle of his fighting. However, Hashirama had decades of battle experience. It was foolish to hope that it could have fooled him. As soon as he detected the switch, he immediately dispelled the clone and turned his attention back to the original, only to find a ball of wind racing towards him. Fudden. Kage Gyorai no Jutsu. Naruto watched as the legendary Kage simply backflipped to dodge the highly explosive jutsu. However, he failed to take notice of the seal on the sleeve of his left hand. Just as Hashirama completed his flip, Naruto was no longer in his vision. He let his instincts take over as he turned around to kick Naruto away, but he suddenly found he couldn't move. Combined with his awkward position of a leg high in the air, he toppled face first into the tiles of the roof. Curiously enough, there was a large, goofy smile on his face. Ho! You managed to paralyze me, young leafling. Naruto was lightly panting as he gazed down at Hashirama, a modified Uzumaki paralysis seal. Complete lockdown of motor functions and cannot be overloaded with chakra, which I'm sure you have no small amount of. Surprisingly, Hashirama outright laughed. To be honest, Naruto did not know what to make of the first Hokage. While he had his own vision of the Shodai Hokage, he had never imagined him to be a goofy idiot, and he was pretty sure he wasn't the only one who thought so when the aforementioned Kage was alive. It was completely undignified for someone who is called the god of shinobi. Hashirama joyfully replied, not every day I meet someone of your age who can catch me off guard like this. The will of fire burns brightly in you, I see. Naruto bowed, thank you for your compliment, Shodai-sama. But the fight is not over yet. He made a shadow clone, who took up guard beside a curious Hashirama. Just be ready for it when it happens. If he wasn't bound, Hashirama would have given a thumbs up with a large grin. Seeing he was bound, he just grinned, not even knowing what Naruto was talking about. Will do. With that, Naruto turned his sights onto the jackpot, Orochimaru. Without any further thought, he flash-stepped, barreling his right fist right into Orochimaru's jaw. Orochimaru was thoroughly enjoying himself. He had sent the Shodai to dispose of the meddlesome Uzumaki, while he teamed up with Tobirama to take Hiruzen down. It was actually quite amusing to hear the legendary water user curse at him, while attacking his own successor. He was about to use an opening Tobirama had created to stab his sensei with the famed sword of Kusanagi, when he was suddenly punched in the face so hard he swore his teeth might have loosened a bit. He went flying back, though he managed a flip in the air and land gracefully on his feet. He looked up and grit his teeth in annoyance. Naruto was standing right before him, kunai held in reverse grip and wind chakra flowing through them. How are you standing before me? You should have been killed by the Shodai. Naruto smirked, I don't see why you need to know. He then disappeared in a flash step, and Orochimaru blocked the swipe at his throat at the last second. Both settled in a furious bout of taijutsu, each trying to overpower the other. Orochimaru knew not to underestimate Naruto in any way, while Naruto knew that he needed to end this as quickly as possible. He delivered a series of punches that were blocked, but pushed Orochimaru back enough for Naruto to execute a move of his own. He front flipped with legs split at 180-degree angle. Orochimaru blocked the first leg with both of his hands, but the second leg came crashing down on his head painfully, causing him to kiss the roof. Orochimaru groaned as he rubbed his head to quell the pain. If he hadn't been suffering blows like that from Tsunade a long time ago, he would have been seeing stars. While Naruto didn't have Tsunade's monstrous strength, the speed he used to augment his attacks made them no less formidable. His eyes opened wide in alarm as he suddenly saw that Naruto was nowhere in sight. All of a sudden, he was forced to weave in between 4 shadow clones that had suddenly appeared from nowhere. One swipe of his sword took care of the first, the second was kicked out of existence, the third managed to poke a pressure point on his arm that made it go numb, but he was managed as well. The last one attempted an upward slash, only to see that he would be stabbed before he could slash the Sannin. So using his slower perception, he let go of the Hiraishin kunai just as he was stabbed in the back. It was almost like slow motion for Orochimaru as he watched the kunai spin upwards. His own free hand reached up in slow motion to grab the kunai before it was too late. Oh, too late. Naruto suddenly appeared mid-air, in perfect position, grasping the kunai by its handle and delivering a direct, blazing palm thrust on Orochimaru's back. The attack was way too fast for Orochimaru to counter and was therefore, bashed into the roof once again. Naruto flashed to the kunai a few meters away. As Orochimaru slowly recovered from the attack, Naruto took a glance to see how Gigi was doing. Not good. He will have to be extremely quick. Hiruzen was heavily panting. He was running low on chakra, and even Tobirama could see that. So exhausted he was, that coupled with his old age, he was starting to get dizzy. He tripped on one of the uprooted tiles and fell back, simply unable to continue anymore. He could do nothing but watch as Tobirama picked up a stray kunai and rushed towards him. Hiruzen closed his eyes as he waited for the end. Rather sad that he would die by his sensei's hand rather than an enemy's. For all his speed, it seemed Naruto was a bit late. Sorry Naruto, but this is the end. Seconds passed, and Hiruzen was confused. He should have been stabbed in the heart by now by his sensei. Opening one eye, he saw that Tobirama's hand had stopped an inch from his heart. Tobirama himself was looking surprised as to what just happened. He slowly reeled back, clenching and opening his fist to confirm for himself if this was really happening. It seems that I have gained back the control of my body, he analyzed before looking over to where his brother was. A clone over there was pressing a hand to Hashirama's back, releasing some sort of paralyzing seal. Hashirama grinned as he shot up to his feet, testing the movement of his limbs. So this is what he was talking about. I have to say, I never predicted this. Tobirama turned back to see just what had happened, that they were out of Orochimaru's control, only to see a deep gash on Orochimaru's right side, with blood flowing from it like waterfall. The Sannin was pressing the wound as tight as he could to slow the blood flow down. Just a second later, his mouth opened widely and another Orochimaru crawled out of it, without any injuries. He had a snarl on his face, but the damage was already done. I can't believe you just did that. Naruto just grinned at his victory. Looks like you just weren't fast enough. What just happened here? Tobirama questioned with authority. Naruto grinned as he recounted what happened moments before. 30 seconds back, Orochimaru stood up as he leveled a death glare at Naruto. The boy had landed way too many hits. There was no doubt that he was skilled and talented, but this was frankly ludicrous. Even he couldn't match Sarutobi sensei when he was that young. But then again, he didn't know the Hiraishin. He teleported to the kunai in the air. I should never have let my guard down after dismissing those clones. Your efforts are admirable, he rasped out, but ultimately useless. This is a jutsu that not even the Yondaime could have found the weakness to. All you are trying to do is delay the Inavi. He never got the chance to finish his monologue as Naruto suddenly appeared in front of him. He placed one hand on his stomach, the right, while the other holding the kunai went right into Orochimaru's side, drawing a surprised grunt from then man. One moment he was standing in front of Orochimaru, the next moment, instant, he was burying a kunai into him. Hiraishin no jutsu. He must have marked me in that attack. Orochimaru thought as he released a breath in pain as the kunai went deeper. Even the Yondaime. Police, Naruto mocked, he would have ended this fight ages ago. Orochimaru felt a burst of chakra down where Naruto's palm was and looked down, his face morphing into horror as he realized what had happened. A contract seal. What are you?" Before he could finish his sentence, Naruto slashed the kunai sideways, right out of the screaming Sanin's body and drawing a huge amount of blood, along with some chunks as well. He then flashed back before Orochimaru could retaliate. Flashback over. Naruto grinned as he neared the end of his explanation. "Gigi told me that you summoned the Hokages from the dead. The fact was further cemented when I learned the full name of this jutsu. Kuchiyos. Edo Tensei is a jutsu that puts the summoned soul in a contract with the summoner to do their bidding. So I simply cancelled that contract with a contract seal, which removes any form of direct control a summoner has over any summon." Tobirama smirked as a pleased grunt escaped his throat. To know the Hiraishin and Fuinjutsu at such a young age and apply it in combat. It's good to know that the future of the leaf is in hands such as these. "What is your name?" Naruto straightened up while keeping Orochimaru in sight. "Uzumaki Naruto, Nadaime-sama." "Who taught you the Hiraishin?" "I learned it from my father's notes, Nadaime-sama." Tobirama raised an eyebrow. "I see." Then he turned towards Orochimaru with a menacing expression. Both he and Hashirama started walking towards the now nervous man, cracking their knuckles. "So you were going to use us to destroy the village we built? You have some nerve." Tobirama added as well, "Don't think you can escape. We are no longer under your control." Both of them rushed at Orochimaru, who knew that there was no way he could do anything. The cages were out of his control by a contract seal, which meant that he could not even cancel the jutsu. Which left only one option. Lower the barrier. "We are leaving. Hi Orochimaru-sama." The barrier was lowered, and Orochimaru turned to escape when suddenly, Naruto flashed in front of him and kicked him right in the face. He went tumbling back on the roof, coming to a harsh stop. He immediately got back up, but there was no way he was able to counter what came next in time. Kaden. Ruka no Jutsu. Orochimaru had no time to mold enough chakra for a counter, so he just brought his hands forward in a cross position. He screamed in pain as the concentrated fire utterly burnt his arm, even from the inside. Only when the fire stopped was he able to jump back. Only years of building up his pain tolerance allowed him to not pass out right on the roof. "My arms." He mentally raged. They were burnt right to the inside, and even trying to move his little finger sent painful jolts up his arms. And he won't be able to change his body for almost 4 months. "I'll get you for this, Uzumaki Naruto." The Sannin fled the battlefield, arms and pride injured and objective failed. He had never foreseen that he would be defeated by a mere genin, much less the Hokage. The only comfort that he could take that Uzumaki Naruto was no mere genin, and even that wasn't much comforting. Down the road, Orochimaru would have to watch out for him. XXXXXXX. "And there he goes again," Naruto muttered as he saw Orochimaru vanish into the ground. Quote, "I'm surprised that someone managed to get their hands on that jutsu," Tobirama commented while looking at Naruto with his hands folded. He looked every bit the Hokage he was known to be. Hashirama on the other hand. "Tobirama, I told you that it wasn't a great jutsu," he said with a hand running down his face. Tobirama turned an annoyed face to his older brother. "Will you be quiet, Anija? I'm trying to talk to this genin." "But shut up." It was almost comical how quickly the god of shinobi could fall into depression. As soon as Tobirama asked Osa politely for his elder brother to shut up, a cloud of rain appeared above Hashirama's head. Naruto chose to ignore the bickering of the brothers and went to check up on the old Hokage, who was now sitting up and watching the bickering with a nostalgic smile. Naruto couldn't think of anything to say, so he just sat down beside him. "Were they always like that?" Hiruzen chuckled. "Always. Their antics never failed to amuse me. But that is what them so great." Naruto tilted his head. "What do you mean?" Hiruzen gave a cryptic smile. "You'll understand in time." Naruto huffed, muttering about old men and their elusive ways of talking. Hiruzen chuckled and patted Naruto on his back. "I have to say, you sure do live up to your title, the most unpredictable ninja of Konoha. I expected some extra weapons considering it was your clone who gave it to me, some really good Fuinjutsu traps. Boy, you almost gave me a heart attack when I saw the 100 Bunshin standing like some sort of army." Naruto chuckled and rubbed his head. "What can I say? I didn't know what kind of attack you would be involved in, so I just did the first thing that came to mind." Hiruzen laughed and said, "It was excellent, and worth seeing the look of bafflement on my former student's face. But seriously Naruto, I have to commend you. You not only displayed the true characteristics of a shinobi in battle, but you were smart enough to figure out how to counter the Edo Tensei in just minutes, while even I couldn't. Naruto blushed a little at the praise and was about to say something when an incredulous voice interrupted their conversation. Did you say, 100 shadow clones? Both of them turned to see Hashirama with a look of wonder on his face as he approached with his brother. Naruto nodded. Hi, Shodai-sama. Hashirama gave a sly look to Tobirama. That's way more than you were able to do, Tobirama. And he is still just a child. Tobirama grit his teeth, restraining himself from whacking the idiot across the head. Cooling down a bit, he turned to Naruto. You said you were from the Uzumaki clan, did you not? I don't see any red hair, so the blonde must come from your father. And while I knew that Uzumaki possessed chakra reserves large enough to best even the Senju, even the strongest Uzumaki could only make 50 at best. Naruto slowly nodded. It was a fair assessment. If it helps you any, I am the Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi. Both of the previous Hokages were surprised, but not that much. Then it's understandable. After all, only the Uzumaki had life force and chakra strong enough to jail the demon, Tobirama mused to himself. Then suddenly remembering something, he turned to the aged Hokage. What are you doing holding that hat in your old age, Sarutobi? Shouldn't you have found a successor by now? Hiruzen cringed at the reminder of the death of his successor. I did, sensei. But he died shortly after taking the hat. Kyuubi killed him, but he was able to seal it into Naruto here before he died. Hashirama finished with a frown. I don't know what to say about this. On one hand, the Yondaime did a great deed by sacrificing himself to save the village, but on the other hand, he passed a great burden onto you, Naruto. Hiruzen looked at Naruto, who frowned in thought. After a moment of thought, he said, well, he couldn't ask anyone else in Konoha to give their child if he wasn't willing to do it himself. Understanding immediately lit up in their eyes. The Yondaime was your father, wasn't he? Naruto gave a proud smile and a nod, that he was. He was also your true successor, Nadame-sama. Tobirama raised an eyebrow in question. Oh. How so? Naruto explained, he took your jutsu, the Hiraishin, to levels that even you wouldn't have been able to. He was known as Konoha's Yellow Flash. Hiruzen reprimanded Naruto for speaking to his sensei like that. Naruto just gave a shrug, just stating the facts, Hokage-sama. Surprisingly, Tobirama wasn't insulted at all at Naruto's praise of his father. In fact, he chuckled. He did that. Good for him then, for I always knew that jutsu could be refined to become better. If he was able to improve it to such a level, then I hope you surpass him as well. It is the inevitable duty of the future generation to surpass the old one. Hiruzen was smiling like it was the best day of his life. Chatting with his senseis right now felt like the old, peaceful days when he was still training under them. But as much as he enjoyed it, there was work to be done. For one, how to release the jutsu of Orochimaru. Since Naruto negated the control from him, they became nothing more than zombies in the living world. As much as I enjoy talking with you like the old days, please tell me you have a way of releasing this jutsu, sensei. Tobirama scoffed. Of course I do. The mere fact that you doubt me is insulting. I had thought of the possibility that a revived soul might escape the control of the summoner, so I created a contingency plan. Anija, follow my hand signs. Hashirama, who was gazing at his village with a sad smile, turned and nodded. With one last look, he walked back to his brother. Just before he started to follow the signs, he turned to Naruto and said, Naruto, in our short fight, I have seen the great potential that you hold. See to it that you don't waste it, and give a shot at the seat of the Hokage if you want to. You know, change the world, bring peace to it. That was my dream when I was Hokage. You have my full blessings. Naruto bowed deep. Thank you, Shodai-sama. Then he grinned cockily and said, and I already have my eyes on the hat, Shodai-sama. No one can snatch the position of the Rokudime from me. Hashirama laughed at the enthusiasm, while Tobirama smiled at it. Naruto reminded him just how his elder brother used to be when they were children. Optimistic at every turn, but serious when needed. Good to know, Naruto. We will be watching, and we look forward to see how you fare. Naruto brightened up like a sun on hearing that. Even though he didn't outright say it, Tobirama had given his blessings to him as well. Even Hiruzen took an opportunity to ask a question that he had wanted the answers to for a long time. Hashirama-sensei, Tobirama-sensei, will you please tell me how you managed your paperwork when you became Hokage? His questions triggered reactions that were completely astonishing. He had expected them to look a little in pain about the paperwork, but instead they just gave him pitiful looks. As if paperwork was the least of their problems during their reign as Hokage. You really haven't figured out after all this time? Hashirama asked, a bit incredulous. Hope blossomed in Hiruzen. That means you know how to tackle it, sensei. Hashirama smiled and was about to tell him when. Don't tell him, Anija. If he couldn't figure it out on his own, then he's a failure as my student and Hokage. That had the effect of sending Hiruzen into a bout of depression that Hashirama was so familiar with. Hashirama flinched as he saw his student with a rain cloud on his head. Is this how it feels to see me do that? Sensei was still so cruel. Don't worry, Hokage-sama. If you want, I can tell it to you, Naruto offered. Hiruzen looked up with a gape. How do you know about it? Tobirama butted in with his usual snide remark. You ought to be ashamed of yourself if you can't figure out an answer that a genin like Naruto can. Naruto chuckled sheepishly as he rubbed his head. Just as the two brothers started the hand signs, Naruto remembered something he always wanted to know. Shodai-sama. Hashirama paused and looked at Naruto with raised eyebrows. Shooting a quick apologetic look to the annoyed Nadaime, he said, do you mind if I ask you a question about your Mokuden? Hashirama grinned and dropped his hands to his hips, as if he was proud of speaking that subject. Sure. I can take a question before going. While your Mokuden is highly regarded throughout the shinobi world as a legendary bloodline, how is it that only you possess it and not any of your descendants? Hashirama became unusually serious all of a sudden, prompting Naruto to think that he might have overstepped his boundaries. Even Hiruzen looked a bit alarmed at how personal the question was, while Nadaime was eerily calm. All of a sudden, Hashirama opened his eyes and with all seriousness, he exclaimed. I don't know. This time, Naruto really did faceplant as Hashirama started laughing like the goof he was. Hiruzen chuckled as well, while Tobirama finally couldn't hold it anymore and whacked his brother across the head, hard. Let's go already. With that, they finally began the hand signs. After a total of 24 hand signs that Naruto carefully memorized for the future, the souls finally left and returned to where they belonged. What a day! Naruto exclaimed with a big grin. Hiruzen sighed and took out a notepad to write one last thing in it. He outed back before Naruto noticed it. Naruto turned to him and asked with hopeful eyes. So, do I qualify for Chunin, Gigi? Hiruzen outright laughed at the adorable childlike look Naruto got in his eyes. It was rare to see it nowadays. Patience is a virtue, Naruto. He could finally relax. The invasion was over, and Konoha had survived. The week after the invasion was as Naruto expected. Everyone became busy in clean-up duty. The damage to Konoha was considerable, so all the genin teams were under their sensei's supervision and working alongside civilians to rebuild and restore certain areas that were hit harder than the most. One thing that Naruto noticed was that the rookies and their senseis mostly stayed together in a close radius, most probably the sensei's way of giving them all some sort of comfort. Now that Naruto stood at the gates of Konoha, he reflected on the past week and all that happened as he about to embark on his first S-rank mission. Each day, something new and strange happened. Either way, boredom was avoided and excitement was maintained. Flashback Tuesday. All the genin teams along with their senseis were standing in the Hokage's office, waiting for their orders. Naruto found it strange that Kakashi had himself come to wake him up at 6 o'clock in the morning. He had told him to get ready and meet him at the entrance to the Hokage Tower in 15 minutes. He had disappeared after that. Since it was morning, and Naruto had figured that everyone would be resting considering what had happened yesterday, it took a few seconds for him to register Kakashi's message, and he found several disturbances. First, he had never, ever seen Kakashi this early in the morning. The man had a knack for being late to almost everything. He would always tell them to report at the training grounds around 5 or 6 in the morning, but he would keep them waiting for a grand total of 3 hours, every time. Second, Kakashi never told them to hurry anything up. In fact, the longer they took to complete a mission, the better. Mostly because he wanted to read his porn, but it also might be because of the man's lazy attitude in general. Naruto had almost believed that the man was someone who was impersonating Kakashi, until Kurama pointed out that it was impossible for a shinobi to impersonate the chakra signature of another shinobi. Naruto had reluctantly conceded to the point and had gotten dressed as usual. He proceeded to the destination via rooftops, noting grimly the amount of destruction the invading armies had caused, even though Konoha had won in the end. As the tower came into view, he was surprised to note that all the rookie teams were standing there as well, along with their senseis. As he landed before them, all the attention was turned to him. Naruto had shifted self-consciously at how all of them were looking at him, as if he was someone else entirely. Deciding to save himself the awkwardness, he greeted them. "Yo, what's up?" That was all that came out of his mouth. He really didn't have much to say, honestly. The first one to react was Shikamaru. "What a drag. He is way too chirpy for the morning," he muttered, slumped as usual. Naruto shrugged the comment aside and looked for any sign of his teammates. There was none. Approaching Asuma, he asked, "Asuma-sensei, have you seen Kakashi-sensei around? He came over to wake me up, which is kind of strange for him." Asuma took a drag of his cigarette and blew it out, saying, "I did see Kakashi a while ago. Don't worry, Naruto. We are assembled due to the Hokage's orders. He has to show up. Hokage personally threatened him with his book collection if he did not." Naruto whistled in appreciation. Not every day the copy ninja with his porn book collection. He went to stand beside Choji, who was looking more cheerful than his friend. Leaning against the wall, he waited for his team. Choji pushed the bag of potato chips towards Naruto. "Yo Naruto. Want some?" Naruto smiled, "Don't mind if I do." His friend had an unusually big heart. To Naruto's irritation, it took Kakashi 15 more minutes to arrive. And he wasn't the only one who was looking annoyed. The man had the nerve to walk towards them without a care in the world. Kurenai flashed a look of annoyance to him. "Really, Kakashi? Keeping the Hokage waiting, again?" Kakashi did not look ruffled in the slightest. "Relax, Kurenai. We still have a full 2 minutes to report to him." Naruto looked over to his teammates. Sakura looked as if she had literally been dragged out of bed, while Sasuke looked a bit more composed. The small twitches of his eyebrow gave away his irritation, though. He looked at Naruto with an expression he couldn't fully describe, but a sense of foreboding filled his being. He did not like that. The rookie teams then entered the Hokage tower together, scaling the stairs in awkward silence. They really just made it in time for the meeting. Gigi was sitting in his chair, looking not one bit sleepy and cranky. In fact, he looked just like when he did on regular duty days. He was, as usual, working on some paperwork. All the genin filed into one line, with their senseis standing behind them, waiting for the aged leader to speak. Hiruzen looked over to them from beneath his hat with serious eyes. He seemed to be evaluating them as his eyes passed from each genin to another. Everyone, except Sasuke, shifted uncomfortably at his stare. When his eyes landed on Naruto, Naruto just gave him a look of curiosity, silently asking the question, "What's going on?" "Team 7, Team 8, Team 9 and Team 10, he addressed in his old but powerful voice, "I have called you here to address the issue at hand. As you have already seen on the way to here, Konoha has suffered many damages in various parts of the village. Therefore, we need all the shinobi available, here and out in the field, to protect and rebuild Konoha in its delicate position. Therefore, from today on, you won't be doing any missions at all. All of you will be joining the construction duty, resuming missions only when I see it fit. I have already told your senseis on what to do. Any questions?" Everyone shook their heads, so the Hokage dismissed them. As they exited the towers to go to their workplaces, the genin began chattering among themselves, now that the oppressive aura of the Hokage had been lifted. It came no surprise to Naruto that Ino was the first one to start talking. "Why is Hokage-sama giving us construction work? We don't know the first thing about it." She put her arms up. Naruto sighed and answered, "If only to shut her up. That's why we have D-rank missions, Ino. Also, we won't be working by ourselves. Our senseis will be giving us orders in a way that we can follow without getting confused. Lastly, the village needs to be rebuilt, as you can clearly see." Ino frowned and was about to say something when Shikamaru spoke with a raised eyebrow. "Oi, Naruto. You were fighting Gaara in the forest yesterday, right?" And just like that, all of the attention was shifted onto their talk. Ino asked in confusion, "Did you hit your head or something, Shikamaru?" Naruto was fighting Gaara in the stadium, not in the forest. Naruto spoke on behalf of Shikamaru. You may not believe it because you were caught in the genjutsu, Ino, but Gaara was a part of the invasion force. For some reason, he was about to retreat with his siblings but Sasuke managed to catch up to him. I was fighting somewhere else. He deliberately avoided mentioning that he was the one who fought and defeated Gaara because frankly, he did not want to be subjected to her endless questioning. Her reputation as the gossip queen of Konoha made him wary of her. Plus, by mentioning that Sasuke was the one who fought Gaara, she would likely turn her attention onto him. As he predicted, Ino turned to a scowling Sasuke with stars in her eyes. So you really did defeat Gaara, Sasuke-kun. I didn't have a single doubt. Naruto refrained from smirking as Ino began to pester the details out of Sasuke. Sakura jumped into the conversation as well, not liking how close Ino was being to her, Sasuke-kun. Back off, Ino pig. Stop laying onto Sasuke-kun. And besides, what do you mean that Sasuke-kun defeated Gaara? Now this question attracted everyone's attention. The Jonin senseis were watching carefully, ready to intervene in case dangerous information were to be leaked out. They all knew who really defeated Gaara, as they were informed by the Hokage last night when he had called them to discuss what to do today. All the Jonin had questions as to how the Jinchuriki of the sand was stopped. Jinchuriki were, after all, beings that contained immense power, and there were very few who could claim the feat of defeating one that was fully in sync with his or her Biju. The Hokage had given them a full report of what had told him when he had summoned the boy into his office yesterday at a separate time than the Jonin. After the report, heavy shock had settled upon all of the Jonin. To think that Uzumaki Naruto defeated the one-tailed Jinchuriki without resorting to his own tailed beast's power was staggering. And not only that, but he had been instrumental in stopping the snake Sannin, who was here to kill the Hokage. The quality of the information was staggering. Shocked mutters and even a few protests and denials had broken out, saying that it would be impossible to achieve two feats such as those on the same day. However, everyone had shut up when the Hokage's killing intent rose up. Hiruzen had thundered that they dare question the word of their Kage. Safe to say, everyone had accepted the information with varying amounts of shock. The boy had done feats that would be impossible for almost every Jonin there was. The Hokage had then given them orders on what was to be done the next day and warned them that the information was to be strictly kept amongst themselves. Not even a whisper was to be let out, or they would be severely punished. Back to the conversation, Sakura was frowning at Ino's statement. She knew her teammates, and while she still had a huge crush on Sasuke, she did not allow that to cloud her judgment. She had seen Gaara fight, and she had seen Naruto fight. She had also seen a bit of how Sasuke fought Gaara before she was knocked unconscious by the giant claw of sand. His speed seemed to have increased very much, and he had a deadly new jutsu. His hand seemed to cackle in lightning. But she could say very confidently that Sasuke could not defeat Gaara or Naruto. When she had woken up, Sasuke had told her that he had managed to escape with her only when Naruto had arrived. So the logical conclusion should be that Naruto defeated Gaara. Ino glared at Sakura. I mean exactly what I said, forehead. Do mean to imply the Sasuke-kun did not defeat Gaara? Just as Sakura was about to reply in affirmative, Kakashi butted in, much to Naruto's relief. Alright, we're here. I'm assigning you your places now so that we don't waste time when the workers get here. We'll start by ourselves until then, so Sakura. You will help over. And like that, the conversation was avoided for the day. All the teams had dispersed to different places in the square, and as the day progressed, the entire discussion had been forgotten. Wednesday. The day before was spent quite fruitfully with all the work they had done. Today, they were to continue where they had left off. As Naruto lifted another of the wooden planks, he was approached by Sasuke, who had his hands in his pockets, trying to look as cool as he could while being covered in dirt and grime. What's up, Sasuke? Sasuke frowned at him and simply said, we need to talk. Naruto looked confused for a moment, but when Sasuke raised an eyebrow, he immediately understood. Sasuke wanted to talk to him about why he let Gaara go. Nodding, he placed the plank in its place and turned to him. You want to have the talk now? Sasuke nodded. He had been thinking on that question for a while now. He knew that Naruto loved his village, but for him to show such sympathy to his enemy was rare, to the point that Sasuke had never seen before. Naruto turned and walked to where Kakashi was doing his own work. Seeing his student approach him, Kakashi paused, raising an eyebrow in silent question. Naruto said, me and Sasuke are taking a break. There's something we need to talk about. Kakashi shook his head. You can't just leave in the middle of work like this, Naruto. The village needs to be rebuilt as soon as possible, so it's for the best if you and Sasuke save your talk aside for later. Naruto just gave him a deadpan and created 2 shadow clones. Pointing towards them, he said, these 2 will substitute for us. I hope that's not a problem now. Please excuse us. He didn't give Kakashi any time to reply, nor did he give Sasuke any time to brace himself. He just grabbed Sasuke and flashed away, leaving Kakashi blinking stupidly at their abrupt departure. The 2 clones took Naruto and Sasuke's place and resumed the physical labor. Kakashi just had one thought. It must be pretty serious if they had to go like that. Naruto and Sasuke appeared right on top of the Yondaim's head. Sasuke almost staggered and fell right over the spike if Naruto hadn't caught him in time. He turned around to tear into the blonde, but surprisingly, no one was there. He turned further to see that C was standing on the edge of the spike, looking over the bustling village. It's kind of beautiful, isn't it? Naruto's tone was soft, and Sasuke could not help but detect that there was a hint of longingness. Before he could think about it further, Naruto continued. The village is like a whole family, taking care of each other. The Hokage is like the head of the family, ensuring that there are no disputes. It must be nice, being a part of that family. Sasuke only looked at his teammate in confusion. Naruto's tone indicated that he was detached from the village, something that Sasuke never sensed from the blonde. Sure, he acted quite aloof and indifferent if only to piss people off, but from the day they had introduced themselves to Kakashi, Sasuke had only seen a strong determination in his eyes. Determination to make his dreams come true. Naruto had made it his ultimate mission to become the Hokage of Konoha, but there was something that Sasuke was missing over here. He said something else besides wanting to become Hokage, to make others acknowledge him. That was something that triggered another memory for Sasuke. The word, acknowledge, made him remember his fight with Gaara. Gaara had repeatedly proclaimed that by killing others, he would prove his existence. Wasn't proving your existence the same thing as making others acknowledge you? Sasuke was getting pieces of something, but still lacked the material to make out what that something was. Where are you going with this? Naruto turned to him with a smile. You still don't see it. Sasuke frowned, trying to see where Naruto was leading him but came up with nothing. Naruto chuckled. This is part of the answer to your question, Sasuke. Gaara and I. You could say we are almost like brothers. Sasuke's head whipped up at that. He then suddenly remembered his thoughts during Naruto's fight with Gaara. Gaara's chakra was crushingly malicious, and Sasuke remembering that he had felt a similar chakra of Naruto during their fight with Haku. Is it your chakra? Naruto's eyes showed confusion. My chakra. Sasuke elaborated. When I was fighting Gaara, his chakra was full of malice, killing. I had sensed a similar chakra from you back in Wave. Is that why you say you are like brothers? Naruto chewed on his lips as he thought of an answer. That is part of why I said that. The reason why I let them go is because Gaara reminded me of myself. Sasuke's eyes went wide at that. He had a hard time imagining the usually cheerful but aloof blonde acting like Gaara. There was no way Naruto could be anything like Gaara. Unknowing of Sasuke's thoughts, Naruto continued, he and I share a great burden, and because of that burden, we both have lived our lives as if we were separate from our villages, not a part of them. I've felt the same loneliness and sadness in my life. Gaara thought that you can only become truly strong if you fight for yourself, but that's not true. Sasuke had a hard time on what to think. Naruto spared Gaara because he was able to identify the burden he had. But what burden could he be talking about? What burden are you talking about? And how can you not become strong if you are fighting for yourself? Naruto debated on whether to tell Sasuke or not, but decided to tell him in the end. He might not trust the guy completely, but it was better to tell him now instead of him accidentally discovering it in the future. Are you sure it is wise to tell him, Naruto? Naruto mentally nodded. I'm sure. Verbally, he said, I'll answer your question in reverse, Sasuke. The only way you can truly become strong is if you wish to protect someone you treasure. Sasuke frowned and asked, and what about the first question? Taking a deep breath, he calmed himself. He never thought that the first person he would be telling about Kurama would be Sasuke. What I'm about to tell you is still an S-ranked secret, with only the Hokage allowed to speak about it, never mind that almost every adult knows it anyway. Don't tell this to anyone. This is my secret, understand? Naruto pinned him with his cold, arctic stare. Sasuke was a bit surprised at how serious the blonde was being, but understood. S-rank secrets were no joke at all. As you may recall, 13 years, the Yondaime supposedly killed, here he made air quotes as to mock the point, the Kyuubi at the cost of his life. What about it? Sasuke asked impatiently. Naruto folded his arms, biju are masses of chakra. And chakra is essentially, energy. According to the law of conservation of energy, energy cannot be created nor destroyed, but only transformed from one form to another. Sasuke's sharp mind linked the facts together. Which means that, biju can't be killed. Naruto nodded. So if the Kyuubi wasn't killed, where is it? Naruto pursed his lips and replied, inside me, sealed away. Sasuke's eyes widened at the revelation. No wonder Naruto was so strong, he thought with bitter jealousy coursing through him again. Why was he chosen to be entrusted such power and not him? It would be foolish of me to assume that your Kyuubi, since a sealing scroll doesn't become a kunai when a kunai is sealed inside it, Sasuke said slowly, after getting his thoughts in order, and reining in his jealousy. Naruto nodded with a smile, happy that Sasuke hadn't immediately jumped to a conclusion. Then is it the Kyuubi that makes you so strong? Naruto frowned, not liking the insult at all, however unintentional that was. As a matter of fact, no. I worked hard to reach where I am now, Sasuke. Also, you remember the feel of Gaara's chakra when you fought him, right? Then you should have no problem in imagining the reactions of villagers if Gaara would have been in the village. Sasuke slowly nodded, thinking it over. Naruto had access to such power, but aside from wave, he never once used it. He then remembered the reactions of villagers when they looked at Naruto when he was small. The task of carrying such burden had made him hated by the villagers. Is that why you said that Gaara was like you? The Yondaime was arguably the greatest seal master of his time, so there was no doubt that the seal he created to hold the Kyuubi would be strong. Gaara on the other hand, his seal was shoddy work, and wasn't able to completely take away the influence of his biju. Admirably though, he was able to hold on to himself, but not without some damage. After I beat him, I told him that there wasn't any reason to not have friends. I had some people that were close to me, but not Gaara. By letting him go, I gave him another chance at making a better life for himself. I do hope he is better off now though. As Naruto gazed off into the distance, Sasuke found that there was much more to Naruto than what met the eye. He had a lot to think about when he got home, namely if he was choosing the right way and becoming strong to kill Itachi. Oh, and I would like my kunai back, if you please. I found out yesterday that I had one kunai missing. I still have to give the next order for them. His voice snapped Sasuke out of his thoughts, and he had the decency to look a bit sheepish at the slightly amused look Naruto was sending. It's really not that hard to guess why you want it, you know. Sasuke mumbled with a bit of red in his cheeks, I was just a bit curious. Is it because of those kunai that you are so fast? Naruto smirked, that's not to say that I neglected my raw speed. But you really should give it back. You can, in no way, decipher its secrets. Sasuke recovered and gave a challenging look, really? Naruto just deadpanned, yes, really. You really think you can decipher its function by studying just looking at 5 kanji? You need to be a seal master to even begin to understand the formula. Even I had to put 3 months worth of fuinjutsu into creating the formula on the kunai. Sasuke mentally raged, but that just lasted for a second. He sighed and said, I'll get it back to you by tomorrow. Naruto smiled and stepped closer, excellent. Now that we have finished our talk, let's get back. Kakashi must be fuming in jealousy at how long we are taking a break. Sasuke noticed Naruto's hand going for his shoulder. He only had a moment to prepare when they were suddenly standing back at their working place, facing a surprised Kakashi. He snapped his book shut and asked, so, you done wasting time? Naruto just shook his head and said, I made sure we had replacements. And don't you take the high road. You were reading that book all the while we were gone, so that day was interesting as well. Sasuke returned his kunai the first thing in the next morning. The next day was probably the best day of the week. On the same evening, council chamber. Hiruzen eyed the shinobi council with a sharp and critical eye, as if assessing them. The shinobi council consisted of all the shinobi clan heads in Konoha, both major and minor. Some notable heads were Inuzuka Sume, Nara Shikaku, Akamichi Chusa, Yamanaka Inoichi, Hyuga Hiyashi and Aburame Shibi. There were some empty seats as well, such as the Hitaki, the Uzumaki and the Namikes. It was understandable why the Hitaki seat was empty, as Kakashi chose to remain a physically active shinobi rather than becoming a politician. The reason why the Uzumaki and the Namike's seats were empty was too sad and depressing to delve in. But enough of that. He hadn't called this meeting to reminisce about the past. No, this meeting was called so he could discuss a report of who should be promoted. Now, this may seem a bit of an inappropriate time for such a matter, but he felt that he should address this matter as soon as possible. It was time for him to choose a successor for him, but the problem was that the successor was absent from the village and as such, won't be able to make a logical decision as to who should be promoted. He fingered the notepad before him absently. It contained what he wrote down about everyone he saw fight, and in the event that he was killed, it was his last and final decision as Hokage. He had written down his choices of promotion on the notepad, along with the reasons. He eyed the elders standing on the side. Homura, Kaharu and Danzo were his old comrades, but after years of playing politics, they had become too jaded, too much stuck to the old ways. Homura and Kaharu he could handle, but it was Danzo he was concerned very much about. His old friend might seem like an old man, along with the other two, but Hiruzen was no fool. Even if he had no proof, he knew without a doubt that Danzo had been involved in multiple activities that he had no knowledge of. And there was no doubt that his old friends would protest against what he was about to do, but he would do it no matter what. Chusa was the first to open the meeting. Hokage-sama, may I inquire as to why this meeting has been called? Hiruzen nodded and said, this meeting has been called by me to discuss possible promotions for Chunin. That indeed grabbed the attention of the whole council. Even Shikaku sat up a bit straighter, and the elders looked at Hiruzen in interest. Shibi's face could not be seen because of his high collar, but he spoke just like his son. Excuse me for speaking this, Hokage-sama, but shouldn't we be concentrating more on our rebuilding efforts rather than promotions? Hiruzen nodded at him. I concede your point, Shibi-san. But there is another matter I need to address. One that is in conjunction with the promotions. You see, I am now long past my prime, so I have to choose another successor, again. But the problem is that the choice I have in mind is not present in the village for the moment. I fear that when they are chosen, they may not be able to make the logical choice for the promotions, as I am the one who took note of the fights. That seemed to satisfy Shibi, as he nodded and leant back a little in his chair. Kaharu spoke next, her voice laced with curiosity. Who do you have in mind, Hiruzen? Hiruzen flipped open his notepad. My first choice for promotion is Nara Shikamaru. This caused mutters to rise amongst the council. Shikaku was now fully awake upon hearing that the Hokage was considering promoting his son to Chunin. His teammates gave him pats on the back with a smile, as a sign of congratulations, but Shikaku waved a hand for them to stop. He had a feeling that the Hokage had more to say. Hiruzen folded his hands under his chin. First of all, I have to say that your son demonstrated excellent strategy against his opponent, Shikaku. He was very methodical and tactical in his approach, and he was able to keep a cool head in front of a seemingly superior opponent. Also, reports of the missions he has done with his team prior to the exam state his capability in leading a team. Shikaku narrowed his eyes. I sense a, but, coming, Hokage-sama. Hiruzen nodded, but even with intellect of such caliber, he lacks some of the necessary qualities to become a Chunin. The foremost that I would like to address is that he seems to lack motivation. The fact that he only fought because Naruto sent him into the arena shows his unwillingness to fight. If he lacks the will to be a Chunin, then I feel he shouldn't receive the rank until he is ready. Homura added his own point. While what you are saying is true, Hokage-sama, sometimes unwilling, but potential candidates such as Shikamaru just need a push. Perhaps the responsibility that comes from being a Chunin might improve his work ethics. Hiruzen thought about it a bit and said, that is true. I also point out that he needs to pull his physical skills up to par in case he finds himself against an opponent he cannot outthink. Only having intellect without having the necessary means to use it is meaningless. However, I put my faith in him that he will strive to improve in order to match the responsibilities that come with the position. Now, I would like to hear the council's opinion. Those who feel that Nara Shikamaru should be promoted, raise their hands. Almost all of the clan heads raised their hands. Both the elders also raised their hands, but Hiruzen was not surprised to see Danzo not in favor of the Nara's promotion. Hiruzen nodded and noted it down. Then it is decided that Nara Shikamaru would be promoted to Chunin. Moving on to the next choice, Uzumaki Naruto. He carefully gauged the faces of everyone in the room. The shinobi clan head's eyes had widened in surprise, but he was pleased to note that there wasn't any hate or negative feeling he was used to see whenever Naruto's name was mentioned. The elders on the other hand, were simply gaping at him, with the exception of Danzo, who had not reacted at all. Before they could speak, Hiruzen continued, "My next choice for promotion is Uzumaki Naruto, but that is not all. I have, after careful thought, considered this. I am nominating Uzumaki Naruto for the position of Jonin." Hiruzen was not surprised at all when gasps of shock and disbelief sounded in the room. In fact, he was willing to bet that if the civilian council had remained, they would have been shouting already. He raised his hand to stop the mutters, lowering it only when the silence had returned. Kaharu was the first to speak. "Hokage-sama, you surely can't be serious." It was as if she didn't want to believe that the demon container was even being considered for such a position. Hiruzen glared at her. "I am not in the mood for jokes, Kaharu." Turning to the council, he spoke, "Before you all start to speak, let me enlighten you as to what happened on the day of the invasion." He first started by telling them how he fought Neji. He highlighted Naruto's use of taijutsu against the prodigy of the Hyuga, but he pointed it out that Naruto had successfully kept Neji on his toes, even landing damaging hits. Hiyashi didn't react for he had already seen this, but the minuscule twitch under his left eye betrayed his irritation of being reminded of the Hyuga clan's defeat against the Namikaze heir. He carefully, orally replayed the fight, saying that Naruto capitalized on Neji's weakness of not being able to see his chakra network, of lack of it. His in-battle intellect was made profoundly clear when Naruto managed to penetrate the supposedly ultimate defense of the Hyuga. Hiruzen also pointed out Naruto's clever use of misdirection as he deceived Neji into attacking a clone, then getting attacked and ultimately incapacitated. He then spoke on Naruto's fight with Gaara. By the day of the finals, everyone knew of Gaara's control over his sand. Hiruzen spoke about how Naruto manipulated Gaara into a position that favored him. His choice of engaging in long-distance combat was sound, managing to eliminate Gaara's strengths, and he had nearly defeated Gaara if the invasion had not taken place. Shikaku used a question with a raised eyebrow. "I understand that it is quite a feat for Naruto to defeat a Jinchuriki without resorting to his own Biju chakra, Hokage-sama. It certainly does speak of Naruto's natural power and talent on the field. He certainly is more powerful than any Chunin that we have, even most of the Jonin, but I still don't see how he can qualify for Jonin." Hiruzen smirked and then proceeded to tell them what exactly had happened during Naruto's fight with Gaara and Orochimaru. After a very lengthy account of Naruto's victories, Hiruzen just sat back with a barely noticeable smirk and watched the conversation unfold. Inoichi was the first one to break the silence. To think that he beat Neji, and nearly beat Gaara 2 times before finally defeating him. That too with Gaara at full strength and with the help of a boss summon of foxes of all beings that is the size of Gamabunta. Then he helped out Hokage-sama by successfully turning the tables against Orochimaru. There was a long silence before Chusa broke it. "I don't know anyone who can accomplish even half of those things." Danzo, unsurprisingly, asked a question that put Naruto in a suspicious light. Where did he get the summoning contract for foxes? He should have informed us of such a development. Hiruzen didn't even need to intervene as Homura spoke next, as if in a frenzy. Perhaps the Kyuubi was responsible for this. However, it raises a glaring concern as to how did he become so powerful to achieve such feats. Could that be the work of the Kyuubi as well? Shibi was the one who countered the argument. "I don't see why you are so worried, Elder Homura. I distinctly remember a meeting long ago in which you had agreed to the suggestion of Danzo-san training Uzumaki-san. Being a formidable shinobi of his time, Uzumaki-san would have become powerful either way. Is there something that we aren't aware of?" Though his tone was as polite as ever, everyone managed to grasp the meaning behind it. Shikaku, being the most intelligent of all of them, already knew why Homura was panicking as such. They were only acting like this because the greatest weapon of the village was not under their control. Kaharu asked the next question, "Hokage-sama, how were you made aware of all this information?" Hiruzen just answered, already knowing what she was going to say in reply, "Uzumaki Naruto himself told me." In unison, both the elders frowned heavily. Then it is possible that he could have lied about this, Hokage-sama. That was as far as she got before Hiruzen's icy glare stopped her cold. Remember who you were talking to, Kaharu. In spite of your bias against Naruto, don't forget that you haven't spoken a word to him all these years, let alone get to know him. You have no right to judge him like that. I have looked after that boy for all his years until now, and I know what kind of person he is. He never had any reason to lie to me at all. Homura asked hurriedly, then you are aware how he became as strong as he is now. Hiruzen glared at Homura. Yes, I was aware, and that is all you need to know about it. But we are straying from the point. Shikaku, I would like to hear what you have to say about this. Shikaku clasped his hands together and said, well, Hokage-sama, from what you have said, I can conclude this: Naruto is an extremely powerful shinobi for his age. His chakra capacity even surpasses yours. His skills in the shinobi arts are formidable as well. His taijutsu is strong enough to best a Hyuga prodigy in combat. His ninjutsu repertoire covers over 4 elemental transformations with high-level techniques, which is more than anything what our best Jonin can say. And from what you have said, Hokage-sama, his fuinjutsu is easily very advanced. If he was able to master the Hiraishin no Jutsu and think up of a counter to the Edo Tensei no Jutsu by the use of a contract seal, it shows how high his battle intellect is if he was able to come up with a way to beat Orochimaru. Improvisation during battle is one of the most crucial things that a Jonin should have. And, he has a summons that can possibly rival Jiraiya-sama's. He sat in silence for a while, obviously thinking over the facts. After a few minutes, he turned over to Inoichi. Inoichi, how well do you think he can handle pressure? His friend folded his arms. From what I have heard, very impressively. Not only he defeated Gaara without panicking or losing his head, but he was able to come up with a strategy to end the Edo Tensei in the middle of fighting Orochimaru. Plus, your question really is quite irrelevant, Shikaku. Naruto has been under tremendous stress from the villagers for years, but he hasn't broken even once. In fact, he was able to shape himself into such a shinobi under such stress is proof of his mental strength. Shikaku closed his eyes and sighed. But before he could further think upon this, Kaharu exclaimed hysterically, but the Jinchuriki is still too young. She then immediately shut up when a dose of potent killing intent hit her. He has a name, Kaharu. And you would do well to remember it. Or have you forgotten just whose progeny he is? Kaharu shrank under her teammate's gaze until she reluctantly conceded, Hi, Hokage-sama. Homura took up where she left off. Hokage-sama, Naruto is still too young, and we don't know if he can be fully trusted or not. Hiyashi bluntly crushed his argument. Uchiha Itachi was an Anbu captain at his age. Hatake Kakashi also became a Jonin at Naruto's age, becoming a Chunin at 6 years old. The Yondaime was a year older than Naruto when he became a Jonin. Your argument has no strength, elder. Turning to the Hokage, he said, I am in favor of your motion, Hokage-sama. I have faith that Naruto will be able to deliver quite well as a Jonin. That started off a chain of reactions that resulted in every clan head agreeing. The elders were mollified and they vehemently protested against this, but in the end, they were just that. Advisors to the Hokage. Danzo did not show outward reaction, but in the inside, he was calculating. The Jinchuriki of a village should be powerful. Even though ours is, I am doubtful of his loyalties. With such power, he would be difficult to control. Hiruzen looked over to Shikaku. What about you, Shikaku? What is your decision in your capacity as the Jonin commander? Shikaku placed his hands on the table. Well, Thursday. The day had begun quite interestingly. For one, Naruto had a very good night's sleep. He had dreams of Temari and him bathing in the hot springs, and this time, they really did kiss. The kiss turned out to be so hot that when Naruto had woken up, his sheets were wet. Oh man, this feels so messy and weird, he groaned as he got up from the bed. Kurama was full out laughing in his mind. Ha 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 ha. You had a wet dream about the sand vixen. Oh, I wonder what you saw. Naruto groaned. Kurama, I don't understand how you can be a pervert. That is Jiraiya's job. And why do you keep calling her vixen? Who are you kidding? You have strong feelings for her. Feelings you know you won't have for any other female. Naruto sighed. Am I to assume that vixen is your way of calling her my lifelong partner, which won't be happening like, ever? That is exactly what I'm saying. And I don't know about ever. Naruto sighed, and when he was about to take his sheet off to clean, his eyes went wide. What the hell? Almost the entire sheet is wet. Safe to say, it was an eventful morning. After he got dressed and met up with his team, he found out that he was cleaning out a whole building today. As usual, he went to work without any complaints. However, he only did it himself for 2 hours before he said, "Fuck it," and produced over 80 shadow clones. He turned to his team and said it with a straight face, "You're way too slow." Kakashi, Sakura and Sasuke, along with the other shinobi and civilian workers in the area, only watched dumbfounded as the horde of blonde shinobi went to work. Naruto looked proudly at his clones for a moment before turning to his team with a quizzed look. "What are you looking at?" Sakura came up to him with disbelief and a bit of rage. "You couldn't have done that earlier." Naruto pretended to think about it for a moment and then said, "No, I needed to do my 2 hours of physical training before that. Plus, you really shouldn't rely on my shadow clones, Sakura. You could do with a bit of physical conditioning." Sakura could only gape as Naruto joined his clones in the building. Kakashi blinked before turning to Sasuke. "He's a bit different today, isn't he? Kind of on the chirpy side." Sasuke just gave the customary Uchiha grunt and returned to working. Yesterday's talk really made him think about what he was doing. Naruto said that true strength comes only when you have something precious to protect. Gaara had claimed during his fight that pain of loneliness and hatred led to more power, and it was hard to prove him wrong, for Sasuke shared the pain with him. But the day before, Naruto had told him that protecting people or anyone you held close gave you a kind of strength like no other. He never had doubted that Naruto was incredibly strong, but fighting a tailed beast not only at full power but also beating it into the ground. That was totally crazy. When Gaara lay defeated, so did his philosophy. Sasuke had clearly seen the defeat in the redhead's eyes. In the end, both Naruto and Gaara were insanely powerful. The difference was, Naruto was happy with his life, while Gaara's was filled with nothing but hatred and insanity. Up until now, Sasuke had been following Itachi's path. He had shunned away everyone. He resented any kind of bond that formed. But now that he thought about it, was he really growing stronger, or had he been stunting his growth? The answers had deluded Sasuke all night, resulting in a restless sleep. There was so much weighing on his mind, that he was at a loss as to if the answer he would arrive at be really right or wrong. Naruto, well, more like his clones had cleared almost half the rubble by noon, after which they decided to take a rest. "Woo, man, that was some good workout," one of them said while grinning. Another one said on the floor, lying in spread eagle position. He groaned, "You're unbearable." Another watched the interaction with a slightly amused look. "You realize that you are essentially talking to yourself, right?" Before the conversation could continue, they all vanished in puffs of smoke. Naruto dropped the half-ram with a sigh. "I'm starting to think I am mentally unstable. I'm calling myself unbearable." Naruto turned to see Kakashi waving at him. "We have to go to the Hokage's office." Naruto frowned. "Why? The cleanup isn't done yet, so why would he be calling the teams over now?" Kakashi shook his head and gave an eye smile. "No, not the teams. Just you and me." Naruto slapped his hands to get rid of the dust. He shrugged. "Let's go, then." He grabbed a hold of Kakashi and flashed right outside the Hokage's office. The secretary jumped and shrieked in surprise, while Naruto and Kakashi gave her bored glances. Kakashi had revived his habit of getting used to random flashes of light. He said in a bored tone, "The Hokage called for us." The receptionist nodded shakily and went in to alert the leader. The sound of footsteps saw them turning around to face Asuma and Shikamaru coming towards them. As usual, the shadow user was slouched, muttering something under his breath. Naruto smirked and leaned against the receptionist table. "What's the matter, Shika? You seem quite grouchy today." Shikamaru glared at him like the devil. "Don't play dumb, jackass. You know exactly what this is for." Naruto walked over to him and slung his arm around his shoulder. "What's up with you? How can you not be happy with a promotion? I'm surprised you are getting promoted in the first place, considering that you forfeited your match." While the genin were chatting, Asuma walked up to Kakashi, who had pulled his book out. "Yo, Kakashi. So Naruto is getting promoted as well." "Looks like it, Asuma," came the bored reply. Asuma frowned at him and said, "You know, you should be proud that your genin is getting promoted on the first try, Kakashi." Kakashi sighed and closed his book. "I would be, Asuma, but I can only be proud when I have trained him in the first place." Asuma's frown changed to confusion and was about to say something when the secretary came back out. Kakashi-san, Asuma-san. When both the Jonin nodded, she said, Hokage-sama will see you now. Hiruzen stared impassively as the summoned shinobi walked into his office. Kakashi and Asuma went to stand aside while Naruto and Shikamaru stood right in front of the Hokage's desk. Naruto smirked as he gazed at his Jiji. The man looked positively tired, not of the invasion, but of the pile of paperwork that was high enough that it was about to topple off his desk. Hiruzen looked at both of the genin, doing a mental assessment of them as was his habit before beginning any meeting. If both of them were excited, they were doing a very good job of hiding their anticipation. Shikamaru was, as usual, looking the epitome of the Nara clan. Shoulders slumped, hands in the pockets and an expression that said, please don't bother me or I might just die. Naruto on the other hand, he looked a bit different than what he usually looked. Naruto always maintained a cool and aloof expression, an indifferent and bored air around him that was reflected in his way of speaking. However, today he looked slightly upbeat than usual. His posture was a bit straighter and he looked ready for any sort of action that might come his way. Also, he did not like the way he was smirking at his losing battle with paperwork. Nara Shikamaru, he barked in a sharp voice, and was pleased to see him stand a bit straighter. He cracked a small smile and said, congratulations your exemplary performance in the Chunin exams, as well as the commendable actions on your part with your other genin colleagues and senseis during the invasion, have earned you the promotion to Chunin. Here is your standard Chunin vest, wear it with pride. He got up from his chair and took the vest from beneath his desk, walking around the table. He handed the light green vest to Shikamaru, who looked at it speculatively and muttered, troublesome. But Hiruzen could see the small smile on his face and the smallest amount of smugness in his eyes. The boy was proud to be a Chunin. I have faith that you will be able to handle your responsibilities efficiently, and strive to become better for the sake of your subordinates. Shikamaru finished zipping up the front and bowed a little. Hi, Hokage-sama. Naruto narrowed his eyes at the aged Hokage. What is he playing at? Kakashi and Asuma were perplexed a bit as well. It was the procedure that when more than one Chunin qualifies from their village, they are promoted at the same time, not individually. If both Naruto and Shikamaru were going to be promoted, they would have been promoted at the same time. As such, only Shikamaru got promoted to Chunin. If Naruto wasn't getting the promotion, then why was he here? Their question was answered a moment later. Uzumaki Naruto, Hiruzen intoned, causing Naruto to raise his head a bit, for your outstanding performance in the Chunin exams. Having a major hand in failing the invasion by defeating the Sans Jinchuriki and foiling Orochimaru's plans by countering his technique and thus, saving your village, I hereby grant you the promotion to Jonin. There was a pin-drop silence in the office. Asuma's jaw had dropped open, and his cigarette had fallen on the ground. Shikamaru was also looking at the Hokage in shock. Kakashi's single visible eye had widened so much it looked as if it were about to fall out. Granted, Naruto played a major role in stopping not only the Sans invasion, but Orochimaru as well. Hell, Kakashi would be hard-pressed to beat just the Sans Jinchuriki, and Orochimaru was totally out of his league, even with his Sharingan. He was certain that there was no way Naruto won't be promoted to Chunin, but skipping it and directly becoming a Jonin. That was a lot of responsibilities for someone of his age. Hokage-sama, are you sure that Naruto is ready for the burden that comes with the position? Asuma's voice snapped Kakashi out of his thoughts. He looked over to Naruto, who had raised an eyebrows in surprise. Poor kid must have been caught totally unawares, he mused. But as he thought about it, Naruto was more than qualified for the position. All the time he spent with Naruto as a team, Naruto had shown all the qualities of a formidable ninja, both in mind and body. Not to mention, he was a leader in the making. He is better than I was at his age, he thought. During his time with Minato-sensei, he had thought that he was more than ready to be a Jonin and a leader. Oh, how wrong he had been. He had been a total douchebag in those days. Hiruzen gave a nod and turned to Naruto. Naruto, do you think you are ready? Naruto snapped out of his shock and looked down in thought, carefully thinking over his answer. Quote, I always believed that I would become a Jonin one day, Hokage-sama. I never expected the day to arrive this early, though. However, if there's one thing that I have learned about life, is that it has a knack of catching you off guard. All you can do is be prepared at all times. Prepare for the worst and hope for the best. Hiruzen gave a nod in agreement. So what is your answer? Naruto took a deep breath and relaxed. I'll do my best, Hokage-sama. Hiruzen smiled proudly when he saw the rock-hard determination in Naruto's eyes. There was no doubt that Naruto would let him down. I'll hold you to your word, Jonin Uzumaki Naruto. He went around his table and took out a storage scroll from his drawer. He put it on the table and opened it, pushing some chakra into it. In a puff of smoke, the unsealed object was revealed to the room. A vest with much darker shade of green, like Asuma and Kakashi. Hiruzen picked it up and walked back around the table, handing it to Naruto with both hands. Congratulations. As Naruto took the vest, he was surprised to note that it was exactly his size, if not a bit bigger. He turned questioning eyes to Hiruzen, who just winked and whispered as if it was a secret. They always fit, was the cryptic comment. Naruto snorted softly and took off his half-sleeves jacket, revealing the full sleeves, high-collar black t-shirt. As he sealed it into a scroll and put it in his hip pouch, Shikamaru muttered from beside him, "How in the hell are you not sweating in all that black?" Naruto shrugged, in a way that looked oddly graceful. "There's so much you can do when you are a master of seals, Shika. My clothes have temperature seals scribed inside of them, to keep my body cool and at optimum temperature at all times." "Pretty cool, won't you say?" Shikamaru groaned while the Hokage chuckled. "That was terrible." Asuma murmured to Kakashi, "I'd kill for something like that." Kakashi replied back, "Me too." Naruto finished zipping up the vest, and Hiruzen, Kakashi and Asuma barely kept their jaws from falling. If not for his height and hairstyle, no one would have been able to tell the difference between him and the Yondaime. Even the clothes looked identical. Naruto seemed to read their minds as he spoke up, pointing towards the photo frame of his father. "Let me guess, I look exactly like him, don't I?" "Why yes," Hiruzen stuttered as Naruto walked up to the frame. The occupants of the room watched curiously, wanting to see what Naruto would do. Naruto gazed into the stone-cold eyes of his father. The same eyes that sent enemies running in the opposite direction, and the same ones that he was sure that were full of love when he was brought into this world. "I'll make you proud," he whispered so softly that even a dog present in the room would have been hard-pressed to hear it. Then, as if a switch had been flipped, he turned back grinning. "So, now that I'm a Jonin, I have a question for you, Kakashi-sensei." Kakashi smiled. "You know, you don't really have to call me sensei anymore, we're equals now, as you said." Asuma grinned and gave him a thumbs up. "Same here, Naruto." Naruto bit the inside of his mouth. "Alright, Kakashi it is." What burden of the Jonin position was Asuma talking about? Kakashi raised a stunned eyebrow in response. "Well you see, Asuma can tell you." Asuma sputtered, being suddenly shoved into spotlight. "What? I mean, well the burden is quite large." Naruto smirked and folded his hands, while Shikamaru looked on curiously. Hiruzen just put his hands behind his back and enjoyed the show. He knew that Kakashi just lazed around all day and read Ika, while Asuma just played shogi with Shikamaru majority of the time while the rest of his team trained. The time that was left was spent with Kurenai. Naruto waved a hand. "Never mind, I'll see it for myself." Putting a hand around Shikamaru's shoulders, he guided the shadow user to the door. "Come on, Shikamaru. We've got to rub this in everyone's faces." The two dead lasts were the first to become Chunin and Jonin. Shikamaru tried to get Naruto's arm off his shoulder. "Let go of me, you blonde, troublesome bastard. This is all your fault. Really? How come you're not happy at your promotion?" "Promotion means there is only more work that I would have to do." As the two bickered and walked away, Asuma took a deep breath of his stick and exhaled. "Wow, that was a close one." Kakashi shook his head. "He really gets you with his comments sometimes." "Actually, he may just have hit the nail on the head," Hiruzen piped in. "You two really don't look like you have a burden." Both of them turned at him, annoyed. "You really can't say anything, Hokage-sama. Your burden increases each second," Kakashi said, pointing to the growing paperwork. Hiruzen grinded his teeth in frustration. "Where in the 7 levels of hell is this coming from?" Construction site. It was break time, and the rookies were all sitting together, eating their lunches. Ino and chatting with each other, for once not obsessing over Sasuke. Hinata was shyly eating her lunch as well, making small conversation with Tenten beside her. Lee wasn't sitting with the rookies, opting to sit with Gai-sensei. Kiba was animatedly chatting with Choji, with Shino quietly sitting beside them and speaking in between sometimes. Sasuke sat a bit further from the group, eating slowly while in deep thought, but not completely unaware of the group's conversation. And then he unleashed a huge tornado of water out of thin air. Can you believe that? Choji vigorously nodded as he finished off the last item of his lunch. I never knew Naruto had such a high affinity for water. We don't know many things about Naruto. Why? Because Naruto hid his true strength from us all this time. However, from his performance in the Chunin exams, it is likely that Naruto is Jonin level at least, Shino pitched in. Kiba scratched his chin. For once, I agree with you. Speaking of Naruto, he has been gone for a while. Where is he? Choji spoke up in agreement. Now that I think about it, even Shikamaru has been gone for a while. Their conversation attracted others' attention. Hinata, Tenten and Sakura looked at them curiously, while Ino was more vocal in her curiosity. Yeah, where is that deadweight? He must be slacking off, leaving all the work to us. Shino pushed up his glasses. Not likely. That's because Asuma-sensei and Kakashi-sensei are absent from here as well. Ino huffed and crossed her arms. Asuma-sensei is no better sometimes. And I haven't heard any better about Kakashi-sensei from Sakura. Sakura nodded. True, Kakashi-sensei is perhaps the laziest person I have seen. But Naruto never slacks off, like ever. Anyo, Naruto-kun is very hardworking, Hinata meekly said, poking her fingers and blushing at merely the thought of the blonde. Wow, people are talking about me even though I just got promoted. The eyes of all the rookies widened when the familiar voice caught them off guard. It came from above them, so they turned to look and promptly dropped their jaws. There stood Naruto and Shikamaru, in flak jackets. Naruto had his arm around a grumbling Shikamaru. That was the first thing that everyone noticed. Why you went to get promoted? Naruto chuckled at Ino's stutter and they both dropped down in front of them, allowing the rookies to get a better look at the two of them. Shikamaru now wore a light green vest over his clothes, a mark of his new rank as a Chunin. However, what perplexed them was that Naruto was wearing a similar vest, but instead of light green, it was a darker shade. Sakura smiled at them. So you are now a Chunin, huh Naruto? Naruto looked like he was barely keeping from grinning full out. Not exactly. Hokage-sama saw fit to promote me straight to Jonin. Huh. That was the exclamation that came from Ino, Sakura and Kiba. Shikamaru scowled and shrugged Naruto's arm off, walking to join a gaping Choji. As always, Shino was unperturbed. Hinata blushed a darker shade of red upon seeing how good Naruto looked in the jacket. You got promoted straight to Jonin. Is that even possible? No fair. Of course, Naruto patiently answered the questions, and accepted the congratulations. Apparently, Shikamaru's promotion was not that interesting as Naruto's. He looked over to Sasuke, who was carefully looking at him. Sasuke felt a twinge of jealousy course through him when he saw that Naruto had been promoted straight to Jonin, but nothing more than that. Rational thought took over and he realized that Naruto only got what he deserved. Naruto deserved more than Chunin, and Sasuke didn't know whether to feel happy for his friend, or disgusted with himself for being so weak. Congratulations, he reluctantly said, not meeting Naruto's smirking face. You may be strong now Naruto, but don't think you'll remain the strongest. I'll be damned if I let you get ahead of me anymore. I heard you beat Gaara, Naruto. Neji didn't stand a chance in the first place, did he? Tenten asked with a sad smile. Naruto mirrored her expression. No, he didn't. Naruto turned to Sakura, who just smiled and gave him a warm hug. Because Naruto was 5 inches taller than her, his chin rested on her head. I'm happy for you, Naruto, she said softly. She knew Naruto would go far. All she could do for him is support him. Naruto returned the hug with a smile. I'm so glad that you do. Naruto released the hug and looked towards Hinata, who froze at the gentle smile on his face. Naruto mentally chuckled. He wasn't stupid, he knew Hinata had a huge crush on him since the beginning of Academy. He only made the connection from their interactions that Hinata liked him recently, after he first kissed Temari. Sorry Hinata, that I could not return your feelings. My heart belongs to Temari now. You deserve someone who will understand and return your feelings. Someone better than me. He walked over to Hinata, stopping right in front of her. He knew that if he grabbed her in a hug as well, she might very well faint. Hinata, he smiled, you look a bit under the heat. Are you well? Hinata only turned redder. Why yes, and Naruto-kun. See, congratulations on your P promotion. Naruto chuckled. She was just too easy to embarrass, something he might have to break her out of. He then noticed Ino sauntering up to him, squeezing his arm. So, Naruto. Now that you have become a Jonin, what will you do? Naruto rose an eyebrow. This wasn't how Ino usually behaved with him, invading his personal space. He rather preferred Temari's touch rather than a nose. It's better that you stick to Sasuke, Ino. He gently removed her arm. Ino pouted, you're no fun at all. Then suddenly, she narrowed her eyes, scrutinizing him. What's wrong? His words were met with silence as she continued studying his face intensely. Several seconds later, she finally spoke in a murmur, you really do look like him. He was not expecting that. What? The Yondaime Hokage, she emphasized. Shikamaru yawned from behind her, of course he would, you troublesome blonde. They are father and son. Ano's eyebrow twitched as she slowly turned around. What the hell, Shikamaru? Alright everyone, break's over. Get back to work, Naruto announced. He was perplexed when he saw everyone looking at him oddly. What? Kiba pointed a finger at him. Don't go ordering us, Tem. Naruto teased and shook his finger side to side, as if addressing a child. Be careful how you speak, Kiba. As your superior, you have no choice but to follow my orders. Kiba sputtered angrily, but reluctantly got up from his spot along with everyone. Shikamaru walked up to Naruto with a smirk. Should you really be doing that, right after you've been promoted? Naruto gave him a puzzled look as he walked over to a pile of rubble himself. What are you talking about? I'm simply doing my duty as a Jonin of this village. You get to work as well, Shika. Shikamaru scoffed, but turned around and headed to work as well. Good thing he's working as well, or I would have socked him in the jaw, he muttered. Flashback end. The next 4 days passed interestingly. News of his promotion to Jonin seemed to have spread overnight, and the next morning when he reported for work, every person that he met was congratulating him. The most annoying thing about it was that they addressed him as Namike-sama, or Uzumaki-sama, once he corrected them. His natural smile had become totally forced after he was congratulated by the 20th person in the same manner. Eventually, he just used Shunshin to reach his destination, but even their people were present just to congratulate him. It eventually became so annoying that he had to excuse himself to the Hokage's office. Man, if this is what celebrities have to deal with, I feel sorry for them, Naruto muttered as he sat in front of Hiruzen. The old man simply chuckled as he continued doing the paperwork in front of him. For once, he enjoyed doing the verbose bullshit. Naruto being the source of amusement might have been a factor. Better get used to it, for in the future, things will only grow, Hiruzen countered while signing another form. Naruto gave a sigh of frustration. Right now, I want to put all my efforts into rebuilding the village. It's not helping if the people start talking to my shadow clones as well. Hiruzen lifted his face to look at the blonde. Intense frustration was radiating from him. His muscles were all tight, shoulders tensed up. The boy looked like if someone congratulated him right now, he would probably coil up like a spring with tension. Then perhaps you would like a diversion. Naruto rose an eyebrow. I could use a diversion. Hiruzen got up from his chair and walked towards Minato's photo frame. Naruto watched curiously as Hiruzen sped through hand signs and pressed his hand on the frame. A click sounded and the frame opened up into some sort of safe. After pressing some keys, the safe opened up and Hiruzen pulled out a scroll. He closed the frame and blew air on the scroll to get rid of the dust. This is something that the Yondaime entrusted me with. I believe it belongs to you, he said as he passed it on to Naruto. Naruto recognized the blood seal right away. Cutting his thumb, he swiped it across the seal. He expected it to be a storage seal, but instead of an object, writing became visible. Those look like instructions to reach certain places. Naruto hummed in agreement as he studied the coordinates. As he studied them some more, making numerous calculations in his head, pieces of a puzzle started to come together. They were written in a way that no ordinary shinobi could crack. Only someone armed with the knowledge of the sealing arts could solve the puzzle to these. 9 coordinates in total, each in a specific location and direction in relation to the village. He abruptly stood up. I'll take my leave, Hokage-sama. Hiruzen watched Naruto leave with a pensive look. Even he did not know what was on that scroll. He resumed his paperwork. Perhaps Naruto may see it fit to tell him, XXXXXXX. Naruto sat down just outside the village gates, shaking his head at how late the man was. He looked over to the gate guards, who were animatedly whispering to each other, not so subtly pointing at him. He scoffed. He had become the talk of the village in such a short time. Nothing new, but it was better than the glares and frowns of the village. He sighed. He never knew Jiraiya had it in him to be late, considering he was the one who approached him for this mission. Flashback, yesterday. He had just returned from his investigation of the coordinates on the scroll. He flashed directly back into his apartment, and damn near killed the intruder standing before me. Oi, it's me. Naruto stopped slashing the kunai, arrow senin. Jiraiya groaned, what will it take you to call me by my proper name? Naruto shrugged and put his kunai away, serious situations, I guess. Besides, I don't see what's wrong with having an affectionate term to call my godfather. Jiraiya snorted as he sat back down on the couch, affectionate, my ass. Naruto removed his shoes and went for some water. Anyways, would you care to explain why you broke the security seals to my apartment? You really ought to improve up on that amateur job. I know you are capable of doing better. Naruto huffed, those seals are meant to stop normal shinobi and civilians, not a seal master like you. And you haven't answered my question. Jiraiya suddenly grinned, brat, you made Jonin on your first try into the Chunin exams. I'm damn proud of you. I heard the tale from Sarutobi-sensei. Defeating a Jinchuriki all by yourself and then sending my old teammate running with his tail between his legs right after defeating the said Jinchuriki. I'm so proud of you, and your parents would be too. Naruto smiled at the enthusiastic man, I'm sure they are. Now why are you here? At once, Jiraiya's expression turned serious. I've got a mission of utmost importance, and I want you to come with me. Naruto sat down across from his godfather. What's the mission? To find the future Hokage of the village and bring her back. Naruto did not say anything immediately. He thought over it for a few seconds. A female Hokage. Out of the village. There was only one female who came to Naruto's mind as he thought of the circumstances. Are we, by any chance, going to retrieve Senju Tsunade? Jiraiya seemed taken aback. Why yeah, but how did you know who we were to retrieve? Naruto shrugged. Come on, it's really not that hard to figure out. A female candidate, absent from the village and strong enough to be considered for the position of the Hokage. There is only one Konoha Kunoichi that fits that description, and it's Senju Tsunade. Jiraiya shook his head. You really know your facts, don't you? Most of your generation doesn't even know about us. Naruto rubbed his neck sheepishly and chuckled. I like reading is all. Then he turned serious and asked, even if I agree to come with you, what's in it for me? I'll teach you a new jutsu, a rank, some really good stuff. Naruto wasn't impressed. Is that all? Just one. Brat, this jutsu is really not your average jutsu. But just because I'm such a generous man, I'll throw in one or two more for you. You good with that? Well, I guess I can't say no to a Sanin. When do we leave? Tomorrow, 1 in the afternoon. Oh, and before I forget, we have to talk about one more thing on this mission, Jiraiya grinned. What's that? But the man was already gone. Naruto shook his head. He had better get some rest for tomorrow's mission. Flashback end, wake up, brat. Naruto slowly opened his eyes to see Jiraiya standing in front of him, an impatient look on his face. This is no time for sleeping. Naruto snorted loudly and got up. You're the one to talk. I've been here since 1. It's 2. No, you're late. Jiraiya folded his hands defensively. I was collecting some very important, last-minute information. For your book, Naruto mumbled as he began walking. Hey, watch it. And it's a wonder how you managed to stretch your last minute into an hour. Naruto continued, neatly dodging the blow to his head. That's it for this video. I hope you all enjoyed the video. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and follow me on my other social media accounts. Anime God here, and I'm signing off.